Hi, welcome back guys. This is your sensei, back with another fanfiction. This is the movie of What If Naruto Fell in Love with Karlach? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. A gift can be a blight, and a kind word can be a slight. A burning sensation. Naruto blinked. He blinked real strong. Well, this is a bit of a problem. Perhaps that was something of an understatement, given the perilous predicament in which the young shinobi found himself. He wasn't in any danger, mind you, quite the contrary, really. He was perfectly safe, not a hair out of place if one were to ignore his ripped, ruined clothes and aching arms. He just had no idea what was going on. His ears were ringing, his mouth was dry, and he was fairly certain he had a hangover. Which was odd given he didn't recall picking up any sort of sake bottle. Nor did he recall stumbling out of the village, legging into the woods and setting up camp in the Arsiendaf nowhere just before sunset. Then, of course, there was the ever so insignificant matter of the crimson cadavers currently sprawled out at his feet. Did he mention the dead bodies before now? Pretty sure he hadn't. Geez, there were quite a few of them. He could see each all too clearly, even in the wan, flickering light of the campfire. Oddly enough, he didn't remember making one of those. He looked down and frowned. His hands ran red with their BLD. Most bore the telltale wounds of the Rasengan and Raisin Shuriken, while others looked like Kurama taken a great big bite out their bodies. Others were torn clean in half at the waist and left for the crows. Speaking of foxes and crows, Kurama, he ventured a confused croak into the stillness. "You there?" No response. He could sense the old fox in his stomach, but he was unconscious, out cold. Back to the bodies then. He made an attempt to count them now and gave up after he reached 5. Strange as it might seem, he felt no guilt for their demise. No shame. No panic. Only mild curiosity and confusion. Who were these people? Why had they attacked him? He was sure they must have picked a fight first. Why else would his clothes be in such a state? Even drunk, he wasn't the sort to kill without provocation or good cause. They must have been some real bad guys for him to kill them, right? The brush rustled ahead of him. He tensed, reached for his kunai holster, only to realize that was gone too. Someone stumbled through. Naruto froze, as did she. For she was most certainly a woman, there could be no doubt about that. Her skin was the most scintillating shade of scarlet he'd ever seen, like a full-on body blush, inked with all manner of tattoos and scars alike. Yet despite the concern in her golden eyes, or perhaps in spite of it, stood tall and strong, clad in a strange assortment of dark leathers torn near her bosom, leaving most of her shoulders bare while exposing a faintly glowing. He frowned at that last bit before noticing something else. Several somethings, really. Was that a tail swaying behind her? And she had horns, actual horns, well, one horn really, but still semantics. The left curled crazily before jutting out through wild dark hair threaded through with crimson, further framing her long, pointed ears, while the right had been broken off near the base of her brow. Said brow furrowed now in confusion at the sight of him, golden eyes squinting warily his way. Was it the bodies? Might be the bodies. Wait, was she going to try and kill him too? That was mighty big axe on her back, and he wanted absolutely no part of it, but he could kill her. It would be easy. He was stronger than her, faster than her. It would be simple. Pivot, get behind her, grab her by the head and twist it. He pushed that unexpected dark urge down and shook his head. Why would he want to do that? She was no threat to him. Sure enough, the horned woman raised both hands to show herself harmless and probably defend him off if he tried to attack. Easy there. I'm not exactly itching for a fight. Neither was he. Best to play peacekeeper for now. Same, he grunted. I'd rather not tussle with anyone right now. Yeah, that got a smile from her. Looks to me like you just had one hell of a brawl already. You running from these bastards too? Maybe. He scratched the back of his head. I don't think I can't remember. There was a great big gap in his mind when he tried to remember where he was or how he'd arrived here. If he had forgotten something terribly important. The one-horned woman titled her head and barked out a little laugh. Well, she whistled. Looks like those so-called paladins of Tyr really pissed you off. Shame you didn't get all of them, though. He wrinkled his nose at her. Paladin what no? Well, they're not really paladins, she gave one of the corpses a nudge. They're posers, this lot. I'm a barbarian. Woulda cut right through. She puffed out her zi, and it almost seemed to glow in the low light as he looked on. Oh, it was glowing, pulsing with every beat. Was that his imagination? Say, you mind if I frisk him? He words snapped him back and he found her tilting her head his way. They might have some valuables and I'm fresh out of coin. We can split it 50-50. What could he say to that? He beckoned. Go right ahead. Thanks. The horned woman knelt down and set to work. Only then did he realize just how snug all that altar was, so much so that it had him looking away even as she spoke. You're all right. She raised her head and he dared to look at her face and nowhere else. I'm Karlach. And you are? He shrugged. Naruto. Well met, soldier. A blonde brow rose. Solider. Sorry, habit. She cracked a rueful grin at him. Do you not like it? This woman, she was too good. Too pure. Shameless, even. He didn't sense an iota of ill intent from her. It's fine. But you don't have a problem with. He made a rude gesture at the corpses, half expecting her to recoil and shout at any given moment. Nah, she scoffed and went back to looting. Far as I'm concerned, you did me a huge favor, taking this many of them out. A pause, and then that dazzling white smile flashed forth once again. Say, soldier, her tone took on an almost cheery quality, now that we're old pals and all, how would you feel about helping me kill the rest of those evil bastards? His heat cocked, Naruto frowned. There's more of him. Yup. Karlach smacked her lips audibly, slipped a few coins into her pouch, then moved on to the next corpse. A little background, if your moral compass needs something to point at. He couldn't help but notice the fact that was most determinedly not looking at him now. I have fought in the BLD war, you know. The term sailed right over his head, despite the shame in her voice. I was good at killing demons. Really good. So good that Zariel, the archdevil herself, made me her personal attack dog. She must have mistook his silence for acceptance rather than confusion, because she barreled right on. I played along and danced to her tune until I could get out of there, the horned woman grunted, tearing a particularly shiny-looking trinket free from another corpse. Took me 10 years to properly escape, but now I'm free. Ever since I got loose, she sent goon after goon to hunt me down and drag me back, but believe me when I tell you, I'm not going. Here at last, she dared to look him in the eye and he saw the anxiety there, just beneath the jovial facade she'd worked so strong to irked. The latest yappy little dogs she sicked on me are nearby, posing as paladins of Tyrwell. What's left of them, she amended with a rueful look at their corpses. Wanna help me take em down? Did he? Karlach seemed. All right, and clearly didn't mean him any harm. Fine, he relented. If they're as bad as you say they are, then someone needs to stop them. He had no idea about devils or BLD wars or hells or anything like that, but he didn't need to know a bad guy to punch him. Yes, Karlach laughed again then, a rich throaty sound that set his heart racing. They cornered me outside the toll house, just up the hill. She jerked her head in a given direction, so he assumed she at least knew the way. Doubt they've gone far after the scorching I gave Emer what you did. His gaze strayed back to her axe. You look like you can handle yourself. I'm surprised there's anything left of them at all. It was the friendly ones you had to watch out for. He'd leaned that from experience. Not just the quiet ones, no siree. Her grin gained an edge. You're all right, soldier. I'd hug you if it wouldn't scorch your skin off. Curious choice of words, that, as if there were something more to it. You gonna combust or something? Or something all right. Karlach finished filching the last corpse and stood with an irritated grimace. Might as well be honest with you. There's an infernal engine in my CHST. It can get a little hot sometimes. She must have seen his baffled expression too, because her own wavered. But don't worry about it, my engine won't be a problem so long as you keep your distance. Honest, I'll get it fixed and then I'll be right as rain, you'll see. That subject sounded like something in dire needed unpacking, but there wasn't the time for it. The sun was even now creeping below the horizon. Might as well get a move on. But when turned to do just that, a sudden wave of dizziness assailed him. It struck with neither word nor warning, causing the world to lurch. The sudden spell all but drove him into a tree and brought him to a knee. He clasped his face and shook his head with an irritated noise as his stomach revolted, leaving him feeling vaguely ill. He couldn't fathom why, but something was wrong, something was in his head, something was telling him to get up and move before it was too late. You all right? He turned to find Karlach peering at him, hauling him to his feet. Was he all right? He couldn't remember. He'd never felt dealt with anything like this before. I dunno. As ever, he settled for a shrug and a false smile to hide his simmering fears. Just feeling a little under the weather, I guess. Look, you seem like a decent sort and you offered to help me. Quicker than he could think, the tall woman scooted over and slung an arm around his quivering shoulder. Stick with me once this is done, and I'll help you get your problem sorted. You and me against the world. She swept a hand toward the setting sun and laughed. Whatever comes our way. Sound fun? Naruto dared a swift, albeit reluctant nod of his own. Fair enough. Those were good terms. Better than he deserved, really. Maybe he would stick with Karlach for the time being. She didn't seem the duplicitous sort and her enthusiasm was proving quite contagious. But more than that, her words encouraged him. He clung to them like a lifeline. Whatever comes our way. Just wait till you see Baldur's Gate. You'll never want to leave. Karlach, heart of iron Gortash, dreamed darkly. His sleep was fractured and broken, tormented by darkness. That alone wouldn't have bothered him. No, it was the beast that dwelt with said darkness that terrified him. Behold the mighty Lord Gortash. The crimson fox before him rumbled out a low laugh. Ruler of no one and nothing. Where is your army? Where are your soldiers? Where is your brilliant scheme now? It leaned forward, exposing row upon row of wickedly sharp teeth. So powerful and yet you will die screaming, not because over your plots or schemes, oh no, but because you hurt one woman. The wrong woman. The woman who has my dear friend's heart. Oh, the irony. What are you? A warning. What a fool you are. It laughed at him. And you will die a fool's death. Wake up now, little mouse. His world went red and he awoke with a furious snarl. What manner of nightmare was that? 0, 0, 0. Her heart was a furnace. Burning and churning like the engine it was, it set Karlach's very BLD ablaze with fury. All because of him. Gortash. She trusted that wretched worm once, respected him, hell it was pretty much her job to protect him for a while there, and that's what she did. She'd been young, so young she didn't recognize evil when she saw it. When he turned on her she was too dumbstruck to realize what was happening. At the time, she'd had a single thought, no way he'd hurt me, right? By the time she realized he really Gortash would, it was too late. They took her heart. Just ripped it out her city and left this thing in its place. That slimy snake had betrayed her for reasons she didn't understand really, reasons that didn't matter anymore. If she ever saw him again, she wouldn't give him time to weave his web of words. Her axe would meet his head. Simple as that. Evil has no real cause. It just exists and delights in pain. She was beginning to understand that now. Evil is as evil does. No exceptions. Evil is evil. Simple. Just like these so-called paladins of Tyr. Fey bunch of phonies. They hadn't been happy to see her again, much less Naruto. In fact, their facade burst like a soap bubble with only a little prodding after they barged into their shack. Enough their leader, some mook in armor whose name she couldn't be arsed to remember, brayed at them. I'll not play pretend anymore, Karlach. You're going home in pieces if needs must. Violence it was, then. She snarled at him. I'll rip your heart out first, ha. His lip curled in a sneer, reminding her so much of her former Now as in the hells, I can see why her ladyship wants a murderous brute like you back. And you, he rounded on Naruto, you'll soon learn what it means to ally yourself with the likes of this Gar-splat. Karlach whistled as a bloody stain impacted the wall. Kid was quick. She hadn't even seen that punch. Avernus was never my home. She growled at the other paladins, heat flaring in her. It was my prison. I'm free now and I'm never going back from there. Everything dissolved into a appealing red slurry of violence. Her favorite. Naruto caught a crossbow bolt and lunged at the would-be archer. Karlach lost track of him for a moment, and when she did, one of her attackers rushed her, blade in hand. She caught it on her axe, roared, pivoted, and disemboweled them with a single swing. Another paladin pretender tried to grab her, only to set themselves on fire for their troubles. Too bad. She swept their legs, sent them tumbling to the floor, and stove their face in with a stomp before they could hope to rise. I'm finally free, you hear me? She rounded on the frightened survivors, eyes blazing, teeth bared in a snarl. I'd sooner die than go back to the hells. You tell him. Out of the corner of her eye she could have sworn she saw the kid catch a claymore between his hands. He just grabbed it right in his palms, then brained the BSRD who attacked him with it. Ballsy, who even thought to do that. And why were his eyes yellow? Nah, didn't matter so long as he helped he gut these bastards. From there it was a wrap. They might be outnumbered, but they had the fury of a battalion and the strength of monsters besides. Zariel's lapdogs never stood a chance. Some even tried to flee before the end. Too bad, so said. They received no mercy. Kid was pretty. Good now that the talks had broken down, because no way in hell was she going back. He knew how to handle himself in a fight. Hells, he tore through those so-called paladins like paper. No stranger to killing, this one. Then again, neither was she. In the end, the slaughter lasted the better part of an hour. Shame about the house, though. It was a shattered wreck now. No way they could use that to camp tonight. Phew, when all was said and done, she blew out a quick little breath and stretched both arms behind her back. Had to let off a little steam after facing off with those Ignots. Granted, the fire's lasting a little longer than it should. She raised an arm and grimaced a bit at her still-burning limb. How do I look? Naruto tilted his head hot. Karlach's tail twitched, betraying her amusement. Oh, so they were on to banter now, were they? Careful there, soldier. If I burn any hotter, I might explode. His face went red. Almost made her want to tease him. Hear that? She thumped her infernal engine for a heart, remember? Lets me burn as hot as the hells. A worrying thought occurred to her when the heat didn't die down. Seems to be running in overdrive since I left Avernus. Won't be seeing my mechanic anytime soon, so I'll just make the most of the extra heat. Just don't get too close till I've found a way to calm it down. Panic. Was that a note of awe in his voice just now? So someone has to tune you up or something? Wild, right? She winked his way. Believe it or not, I'm one of Zariel's least mutilated pets. But it's a bit early in the game to be getting onto tragic backstories. Let's save the scars how for later, after we've worked up an appetite for tragedy. Meanwhile, I'll need to find someone who can tune up my engine sooner rather than later. Believe me when I say this thing is hot. Yeah, no kidding. He looked her up and down with a rueful grin. You're kinda smoking. Something fluttered in Karlach's tea, and for once, it wasn't her engine. Were they flirting now, or was he being dense? Either way, she kinda liked it. Look, the first time I ran into those paladins, they let slip there was an infernal mechanic in the area. A tiefling. No recognition on his face. That was a good thing, she supposed. He might be able to stabilize things if I can find him. Pretty sure there's a druid's grove nearby, I think. Seems as good a lead as any. He shrugged one shoulder. You know the way. Meh, more or less, she waffled a hand. I'm sure we can find our way if we stick together. He didn't protest, so she took that for the acquiescence it was. Hopefully our guy will be among them. A tune-up would do this old tub a world of good. But first, don't suppose you know how to make camp. Wonder of wonders, Naruto actually did. Wouldn't have thought someone like that or this young would know his way around a campfire, much less how to string up a pair of tents. The toll house might be awash, but it had some decent salvage, and the bodies of her pursuers had loot and armor they could sell besides. Naruto lingered over each one, frisking them clean. Did that make him a bit of a loot goblin? Seemed young for that to... Another thought struck her then, and not a best pleasant one. Oh gods, am I robbing the cradle? No, he had to be at least 18, right? Yeah, definitely. Must be. Better bloody well be when asked about his outdoor skills. Naruto simply gave a shrug and said, Kakashi-sensei always told us to be prepared. Yamato-sensei even more so. And there it was, another morsel of his past left at her feet for her to inspect. Unfortunately, she botched the pronunciation. Sensei? Sensei? He corrected not unkindly. Blast it all. Try again. Shana. He was smiling now. Sensei? Right, I've got it this time. She ran the word over her tongue a third time, tasted in on her lips and frowned as he finished setting up the tense. You know, I'm not familiar with that word. And I've been to the hells, so that's saying something. His smile took on a small, sad hue. It means teacher. Or mentor, I suppose. He thumbed his chin and considered the starry sky above for a moment before giving up with a shrug. Doesn't matter now. I won't see them again anyway, ouch. Way to put your foot in your mouth, Karlach. Bloody deep-throated, why don't you? Sorry. She managed, wearing a grimace. I'm sure they were good people. They were. He looked back to her with a wistful sigh. Some of the best. Did you know I was an absolute brat to them in the beginning? He palmed his face and rasped out a laugh, going on and on about my dreams, hooting and hollering like a broken record. His voice gained an edge that hadn't been there before, a hint of bitter self-loathing once carefully concealed beneath a sunny smile, but no longer. I'll become the next Hokage, I'll bring Sasuke back, believe it, they must have hated me. I really didn't do much to endear myself to them at first. I kept throwing myself headlong into danger without a care in the world. There was something more to his words, a hint of self-loathing, regret perhaps. This isn't entirely about them, is it? Not really, no. He shook his head. It isn't. Then why the long face? She couldn't touch him at the moment, but she could prod him with her words. Well, I'm definitely a murderer now. He turned a small glazed smile on her. I helped you kill those people and it felt good. Palming his face, he looked away. Why did it feel good? It shouldn't, right? Like hell she was leaving it there. Not after that, hey, she buelled forward, pausing just shy of touching him. Don't worry about it. Whatever's bothering you, just leave it to Mama K, alright? If you have a problem, don't keep it bottled up inside. Just talk it out with me. But he squinted up at her, rather reminding her of a fox. You're not that much older than me. She granted him a bemused grin and managed a quick elbow to the ribs without burning him. Wasn't what I meant, soldier. Then I'll accept that sentiment. He looked like he wanted to say more, only to think better of it at the last second. Night, Karlach. She let him go, watching sadly as he slipped back into the tent. Good night, kid. A faint rustling was her reward, nothing more, nothing less. Well, she sighed, I really loused that one up, didn't I? The night held no answers for her. Only silence. Karlach turned in, dead tired already. Her head hit the pillow. Sleep came easily. And if she dreamed of a certain glowing blonde, well, that was her secret to keep a bear. Heh, nice beastie you got there. Unfortunately for you, mine is bigger than yours. Naruto, make your move. The kid was alright. Karlach knew she might not be the best judge of character Gortash with a rusty spigot until he was red and dead, but she had a feeling about this one. Naruto was everything she'd once thought her former boss would be, good and pure, bright as the sun itself. Good soldier, that one, and not at all afraid to throw down in a fight. Sure, he was a little scatterbrained and a bit dazed at times, but hey, she could live with that. He seemed to have a good head on those shoulders, and more importantly, he didn't have a mind flayer tadpole swimming around in his noggin. Probably ought to do something about her own before she up and sprouted tentacles herself. Still, her infernal engine thumped loudly in her city at the thought. If she still had a heart, she was sure it would have skipped a beat. And was it her imagination? Or had she actually managed to touch him yesterday? Nah, no way. He would have been burnt to a crisp. It just wasn't possible. Must have been her imagination. Gods, she wished she could touch someone again. Maybe one day she'd be able to, once she got this engine of hers sorted. 10 years of the hells and Zariel and Avernus and a life full of nothing, but yet now she was free. Free to do as he pleased, with whom she pleased, once she got this wriggler out her eye. She stole a glance at Naruto as they broke down their camp. Well, she didn't do much in the way of breaking. That was all him and those strange doppelgangers of his. Between the four of them, they had their little camp tidied up quick smart and were soon on their way down the road once more. Pretty neat, really. What kind of magic was that, and where could she get some? SHT, now her mind was wandering. So hat's it like? Karlach nearly tripped over her own 2 feet, drawn out of her thoughts. What's what like? Having horns and a tail? He gestured at her head. Always wondered what it was like. Thump 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 went her engine. Almost like it was nervous. A small, silly smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Not all they're cracked up to be. She traced the broken stump on her forehead. Lost this one down in Avernus, but the other one makes it hell wearin' a helmet, you know. Don't get me started on the tail. He laughed a little at that, skirting a fallen log as they continued down the path. I could fix your broken horn, if you like. She side-eyed him. You yenkin my chain. Nope, he smacked his lips, producing an audible pop. Whatever awkwardness pushed its way between them last night had evaporated with the morning dew. Fine by her, gimme a second. His body burned bright as he raised a golden palm and, faster than she could blink, pressed a hand to her temple just below her broken horn. He touched her. Was actively touching her, now. Like it was nothing, like he didn't even notice her heat. Her mind fizzled. She tried to speak, but all that emerged was a soft, disbelieving gasp. And fixed, Naruto stepped back, grinning ear to ear. How's that? Karlach reached up with trembling fingers to touch the broken base of her horn. True to his word, it was broken no longer. A healthy spire of black bone awaited her questing touch, curling gently behind her head. She'd almost forgotten what it was like, having her head balanced again. For so long she'd grown used to having weight upon one side of her head. It felt good. Right and proper. But more than that, she rounded on him, fire flickering in her eyes. Do it again. Naruto tilted his head. Do what? That glowy thing of yours? You mean my chakra cloak? He blinked, befuddled by her request. Why, just do it, all right. He shrugged and burst into flames again. The habit. Karlach inched forward, scarcely daring to hope. Another step now. Yet another. Another. She laid a tentative hand on his palm. Did that hurt? No. Naruto squinted at her. You all right there? You're acting weird. A disbelieving noise burst from her lips, rising into a merry cackle. All right. She was better than all right. Her eyes snapped to his with intent. Naruto gulped. Whoa. Get over here, he squawked in surprise, unable to escape as she dragged him into a crushing embrace. Not in pain, but surprise when she buried his head in her bosom. And yet for all that he didn't burn. No, if anything the whiskered warrior shone bright like a beacon, so much so that her searing flames didn't affect him at all. Or rather, they couldn't. Was that shroud of his to blame? Or maybe Karlach can't breathe. Oh, sorry, she let him go with a giggle, idly ruffling his shimmering hair. Sorry about that. It's just been so long since I've been able to actually do that. Do what? His brow furrowed. Touch someone. She grabbed the baffled blonde by the shoulders and gave him a good strong shake. Every time I tried, they got burned. How'd you do it? Tell me. Naruto looked down at himself. Well, I'm burning pretty hot myself right now. Wait a second, let me see. He dropped the cloak and tried to poke her shoulder, only to recoil with a spark of flame. Karlach's joy died an ugly death. Naruto flared the cloak again and repeated his attempt. This time, there was no such interference, or if there was, it didn't seem to bother him overmuch. A golden finger poked her side, inadvertently tickling her, and she batted his hand away with a startled yelp of laughter. Stop that, I'm bloody ticklish. Tell me more about this engine of yours. His confused smile dimpled into a scowl as he folded both arms before his knee. It doesn't sound good. It isn't. She fought down a scowl of her own. Zariel cut me open and shoved it where my heart should be. If that were all, I could deal with it. But when I get emotional, I've been well hot. She gestured expansively to her still glowing tea and the aura of flame even now flickering over her body. Really hot. Hot enough to burn anyone who tries to touch me except you, when you're like this, apparently. And what a joy that was. So you're a devil with a heart of iron? Naruto surmised, thumbing his chin. Thump, there it went again. She hadn't known her infernal engine could skip beats like that. Devil with a heart of iron. Heat speared through her face as she scratched the back of her head with a sheepish smile. I mean, it has a nice ring to it and all. I'm flattered, really. But I'm a tiefling, not a devil. There's a difference. He squinted at her, comprehension nowhere to be found in his gaze. There is. She tousled his hair. You been livin' under a rock or something? His face creased in a sigh. Or something? A hawk cried above, capturing their attention. Somehow, someway, somewhere, Karlach managed to wrestle her burgeoning emotions under control and focus again, if only just. Even then her hands itched restlessly, longing to touch him again. Never in all her life had she missed something so badly and never known until she received it. If she smiled any wider her face was gonna crack, she just knew it. Right? We're burning daylight here, aren't we? Naruto shrugged a shoulder. Suppose so. We've got to get to that grove of yours, right? Well, it's not my grove per se, but we really don't have any other leads. They walked on in companionable silence after that. Finding the Emerald Grove wasn't strong. The path led there well enough. They just had to follow the noise. Wait, noise. Those were screams she heard. Rounding the bend, they came face to face with a ghastly sight. 3 battered adventurers stood before a barred wooden gate, narrowly fending off a teeming pack of goblins. One of their number had taken an arrow to the knee, and another went down with a swing of the blade, clutching their arm. That left one standing against the rest, and nope, not having that goblins. Nasty buggers. She reached for her axe, hefting it with intent. Let's sort him out. Nah, Naruto stifled a yawn behind his palm. Don't feel like dealing with him. Karlach rounded on him, incredulous. You sayin' we should just leave? Those people need help. Who said anything about leaving? He crossed both hands together, fingers forming a seal. Just watch. Goblins are bad guys, right? Yeah, but why? Ask. Smoke billowed forth around them. 24 Narutos grinned back at her, cheeky as can be. The original move a finger forward with a single declaration. No survivors. They surged forth. What followed a slaughter would have been generous. The goblins didn't stand a chance. By the time they realized the danger, it was already too late. The scouts had only just begun to turn when the horde descended upon them. They went down in a sea of orange and black. The rest soon followed, dying with bloody gurgles as they were summarily beaten, blasted, and in some cases torn clean apart. It was brutal, it was visceral, it was a slaughter that would have made the Lord of Murder himself cackle with glee. All this in a minute. Karlach had only one objection to it all. No fair, you hogged all the kills, I didn't even get a chance to chop 'em up. Naruto didn't answer. He was still staring at the corpses. There was an oddly glazed look in his eye. Soldier. She waved a hand before his face. Hello. Anybody home? He blinked quickly, reorienting himself. I'm fine. Don't worry. Well, when you phrase it like that, now I am worried. I said I'm fine, you know. Shaking his head, he waded through the bloody puddle left behind and tended to the wounded. Mercifully, the trio guarding the gate had survived, albeit with grievous wounds. The battered blonde soon set to rights with brisk dispatch. That really was a nifty little rick of this, even if he did shrug off their thanks as the gate opened. A weary-looking tiefling awaited them beyond the gates. Another sister-in-arms. He granted her a tired smile. A pleasure to meet you. My name is Kevlar, and my thanks you have, for your timely aid. Quick as can be, he seized Naruto's hand and gave it a mighty shake. When the Blade of Frontiers left to chase a pack of goblins, we feared the worst. A tingle shot down her spine. The Blade of Frontiers. Positive. Better conclude their business here quick. He wanted something from them. A leader he might be, but had the look of a desperate man. As it turned out, he did. Karlach didn't pay attention to the specifics. She had Naruto for that, but in the end, it led them down the path through the grove proper to yet more conflict. Because that was life. Just full of sunshine and rainbows. A crowd of angry tieflings stood before 3 druids, pleading for entrance. She heard snatched of conversation as they drew near. We need to get Arabella out now. You heard the guards' theory waiting on Kaga to give word. I'd sooner trek through the 9 hells than trust that savage snake. And then they were free and clear, pushing their way to the front of the pack. Please, a young woman pleaded, let us through. The taller of the trio flung out an arm, barring their path. It is forbidden. One of them stepped forward, fangs flashing. Let my daughter go right now. Naruto tensed behind her. Daughter. She's a thief, hellspawn, the druid countered. And you will wait for Kaga's judgment. Now get back, let me through Mragresham or I'll rip your demon throat out. It was the wrong thing to say. As she looked on aghast, one of the druids roared and burst into the shape of a bear. Pretty wild that. The tieflings certainly didn't think so. They immediately turned tail and fled. Not so Naruto. He waded forward, eyes dark. Let us through. I want to speak with this Kaga of yours. The shortest of the druids balked at him. And who in the hells are you? Naruto eyed the bear sidelong, considering it as one might a small, adorable puppy. Nice beastie. His jin was just a touch sharper than she remembered, than it had been before. Wanna see mine? Karlach took a step back. To be fair, she wasn't sure why only that she did. Some sixth sense compelled her to move right now. Just in time. One of the druids bristled. You would dare threaten us with a beast? Naruto paid them all the diligence they were due, which is to say absolutely none at all. Unfortunately for you, he placed his hands together and the air boiled as the world shifted. Mine is bigger than yours. Light and mass and form swept up around him to form a singular shape, that of a mighty fox towering over them all. It loomed large over the grove, towering over tieflings and druids alike. Some screamed. Others fell to their knees in awe. Still more of them just plain froze. Karlach was somewhat ashamed to find herself among the latter. The bear whimpered and crouched down in fear. Naruto ignored him. I said move. You threaten us? I'm not threatening you. He stared blankly at one of the druids. Right through her, really? I'm educating you. Golden eyes gazed up at the towering titan above them. Kurama, if any of these druids attack, squashing. That's a threat. He leaned forward, teeth bared. See the difference? When they didn't immediately comply, he backhanded the first druid, kicked away the second, and shoulder-barged the third aside. Vines sprang forth from another to entangle his feet, but he burned through them. The fox moved with him, and cries went up, draining all hope of resistance with them. Let's go, Karlach. He had his eyes on a stone door clear across the clearing. When that didn't part at his touch, he smashed it clean open and charged in. Karlach had no choice but to numbly follow in his wake. What else could she do? She wasn't getting in the way of that Kaga. She heard her beloved blonde bellow, voice booming like thunder, I want a word with you, monsters. I've seen loads of those. Sometimes I wonder if I'm one, myself. Naruto. Bare your fangs anger. Searing hot rage. All-consuming wrath made manifest. There were so many words, so very many W's to describe what Naruto was experiencing here, now, in this given moment as he barreled forwards. What he saw. What he felt. What he heard. He could have spent an entire day listing them all, not that it would have done him much good. So he'd settle for mad. Big med. Much med. As in I am going to grab that bitcha druid by the head, tear it off her shoulders and crush it in my hands, levels of mad, you know. He felt it was warranted, given what he saw as he tore the door down and stormed in. Much to his annoyance, those within didn't even seem to notice him at first. Two druids were arguing heatedly amongst themselves, one a man with dark skin and a strange horned mantle about his head, the other a noisy redhead bearing sharp looks and a sharper tongue. Her voice rose as he drew near, waspish and sharp, cutting the very air with her words. Lock her up, she declared. I won't say it again. This is madness, Kaga. The older druid rallied, and for a moment, he wondered if cooler heads would prevail. She's just it was not to be. What? Wrath, the woman rounded on him. A thief. A poison. The threat. I will imprison the devil, and I will cast out the rest. The circle will be closed. Halcyon would never. Halcyon isn't here. She all but spat the words at him like a poison. Keep his name off your lips. This girl is a parasite, like the rest of her kind. She eats our food, drinks our water, then steals our most holy idol in thanks. I will not have it. She remains here until the ritual is complete. Rounding the bend, he finally belled the victim in question. He almost wished he hadn't seen her. Because anger blazed higher. That tiefling mother back in the grove he'd not stopped to get her name had said the druids were holding her daughter captive. He'd heard that, he remembered that, he'd known that, but he hadn't realized she was a child. It just hadn't clicked in his head, you know. But it did now. Arabella wasn't a danger, wasn't a parasite, and she certainly wasn't a threat. She was but a little girl clad in threadbare rags. All wide eyes and ashen skin, her hair bright brown. And there, jutting from her forehead, 2 tiny horns. In the low light her gray skin looked almost red. An image of a young Karlach sprang to mind, unbidden. He wasn't sure why. She looked so scared, terrified, really not of him, but rather the serpent mere inches from her throat. "I'm sorry," her voice rose in a pitiful cry as she wrung her hands. "Please, I won't do it again. Keep still, devil." The woman sneered at her. "Tila is restless." He gave Wrath one last chance. "Come, Kaga, we took back the idol. There's no need for any of this." The woman looked his way, and her pet with her. "Enough of your pointless prattle, you weak-willed fool." Arabella saw her opening and took it, tried to run. Kaga's snake struck like its namesake. Naruto struck faster still. He blurred between them, ripped the viper out the air by the throat, and bared his teeth at it in a spectacular snarl. The sound rumbled through the room and brought everyone up short, druid and tiefling alike. As far as entrances went, he couldn't have asked for a better one. All angry and glowing gold with chakra, towering over the like some kind of gilded god, teeth sharp and eyes burning a molten shade of amber. It was a moment that the entire grove would remember for decades to come, a tale passed down alongside his earlier arrival with Kurama. Somewhere in the back of his mind, something stirred and he could have sworn he heard laughter. But he wasn't paying attention to that. Oh no, he was far too focused on the spiteful snake in his fist, of the fangs even now sinking into his wrist. It had reacted accordingly to being grabbed and bitten him instead. Fire burned through his BLD, drawing an annoyed grimace through to his whiskered cheeks. It bit him thrice more, to no avail. He didn't budge. Poison root. He'd dealt with worse than this. Kurama burned it right out of his system altogether, flooding his veins with fresh chara before the venom could hope to take hold. Thus unaffected, he leaned in and hissed out an angry breath at the vicious viper in his grasp. "You lay your fangs on that girl and I will eat you. Are we clear?" Tila went limp in his hand, message imparted. "Now scram." He cast the accursed creature to the side and watched her slither away into the shadows. Kaga burst out indignantly and reached for her staff. "Tila, how dare you!" Silence. Killing intent flooded the room, rendering her words a garbled gasp. He heard Karlach off to the side, having caught up with him at long last. "That's some kinda intimidation. Neat skill you've got there." She nudged past him with a wink and knelt before an anxious Arabella. "Come here, kiddo." She beckoned the frightened child her way, careful not to touch her for fear of burning her. "Let's get you back to your parents while Soldier sorts these two out." Arabella perked up, hope dawning in her infernal eyes. "Mum and Pops." Karlach smacked her lips, producing an audible pop. "Yup." She rounded on Kaga. "You said they left." The haughty druid actually had the nerve to scoff. They should have, if they were wise enough. Enough he couldn't bear to hear one more word from her vile venomous voice. Naruto's hand cracked out, backhanding Kaga across the face. She reeled and he stepped in, hammering a fist into her stomach. Her body folded over his arm with a gasp. When she tried to speak a spell, he grabbed her by the hair, forced her to raise her gaze, and delivered a crushing headbutt to her skull. Kaga stopped trying to talk after that. His now free fist twitched restlessly into a claw at this side, itching to reach down and gouge out her eyes. Those arrogant, awful, angry eyes. It would only take a moment. Movement shifted in his peripherals. His gaze slid to the right, seeking its source. Wrath raised both hands above his head in peace. "I mean you no harm," someone who knew when he was outmatched and had no longing to pick a foolish fight. How rare. He looked back to the dazed Kaga, voice rumbling with the deep tenor of his and Kurama's fury. "And something else? What kind of druid threatens a helpless girl?" Kaga trembled in his grasp. "Right. Killing intent. Should probably let go of that, shouldn't he? Go on. Answer my question. What kind of druid attacks a child?" She glared at him, recovering some of her inner fire. "The kind that protects her grove? Protection." He blinked once, anger stilled by sheer incredulity. "You cannot be that stupid." You just can't. In what world does this count as protection? This is our grove, she grasped at the hand gripping her hair, to no avail. We shall do as we please, and just like that his rage returned with interest. I knew a woman who did what she liked. He yanked on Kaga's hair, drawing a pained cry from wrathful woman. Do you know what happened to her? Oh. She got her butt kicked. Much like I'm about to do with you. But first, he craned his neck toward Wrath. You have healers here, right? The elder druid hazarded a frightened nod. We do, his brow furrowed. Really good healers. Nettie is quite skilled, he hedged, but him's Halcyon is far superior, if you could just Halcyon. Sounded important. He'd remember that name for later. Until then Karlach heaved a sigh, realizing what intended. Naruto no. Naruto yes, he turned a merry, mad smile on her. She tried to kill a kid, this is what she deserved. Karlach ushered Arabella outside. Just as well. She shouldn't see this. He released Kaga's hair, grabbed her by the face, whipped her around, and bashed her skull against the nearest wall. Twice. Thrice. On the fourth and final strike he felt her nose break and her skull crack as she struck the stone with a dull thunk. From there he let her go. She slid down at his feet, an insensate twitching mess, but still alive, if only just. He'd made certain of that. Let this Nettie lady heal her. She'd never be a threat again. A trio of rats, they seemed strangely angry to his senses, scurried past his feet, fleeing into the shadows. He paid them little heed. They were just rodents after all. He wondered if the other druids would attack him for the horror he'd just inflicted, then decided he simply didn't give a DMN. If a druid tried to kill a little girl in cold BLD, then that druid was evil, as was anyone who willingly followed her. Well, he looked to Wrath, wondering if the poor fellow would follow in Kaga's footsteps. What about you? Peace, brothers and sisters, the druid flung up his arms. Let there be no further bloodshed here. Naruto eyed him like a hawk. I am not your enemy. The elder druid lowered his arms and dared to step forward. You have my thanks for saving that child. But was that? He glanced over at Kaga's twitching form as a short woman rushed over to tend her wounds, really necessary. Head injuries are tricky things, even for our kind. She may never truly recover from that. Maybe so, but he didn't dare drop his chakra cloak yet, even if the man seemed sincere. Still, maybe he'd overdone it. Hesitation reared its ugly head in his heart for a moment before he slashed it down and shook his head. My people have a saying. Inaction is worse than any action. Leaving her in charge would have been a bad idea, not just for you, but your grove. The man granted him a careworn smile. I imagine so. You would have slaughtered everyone in this room. He would have. The thought brought him a strange rush of pleasure, one that startled him. His fingers twitched, longing. FO violence, aching for more BLD. Wasn't this man guilty as well? He'd stood by and let Kaga have her way, nearly allowed her to take the life of a child. No. He wrangled himself back from the brink and took a deep breath. His rage didn't abate, but it did dull for the moment. This wasn't over, you know. Naruto heaved a sigh. Kurama was right, much as he wished he wasn't. He'd cut the head off the snake figuratively, but the conflict between the tieflings and the druids yet remained as its body spasmed. The moment he stepped back outside, he'd be in the thick of it. Wrath might have promised him peace, but he was almost certain the other druids would take an offense the second they saw Kaga's battered body. They wouldn't just try to kill him, oh no, they'd turn on the tieflings as well. Those poor people, who just wanted to thrive, to survive, to live. He could think of only one way to bring this conflict to a close without further bloodshed. If that bloody idol was the problem, the source of this conflict, then he would remove it. 0, 0, 0. What's he doing? Karlach's jaw clicked open. Bloody brass ball on that boy. 0, 0, 0. Unhand the idol, not a chance. Naruto hefted the totem in question, snatched it off its pedal, and subsequently brained a nearby druid with it for good measure, knocking the man right out. It had the desired effect of drawing all eyes to him, every last one, just as intended. He stood a bit straighter, prize in hand. You're all acting like children, and I've had enough. See this. He hefted their precious relic with intent, eliciting a wince from all druid parties involved. I'll give this back when you act your age. In the meantime, you're going to let the tieflings in and protect them. You can have it back once the goblins are gone. He very much doubted anyone here was equipped or willing to deal with that problem, which meant he'd have to deal with it. But he tossed the relic to Kurama overhead, who caught it firmly in his giant jaws and laid down in the grove, nearly squashing a nearby fellow wearing fanciful blue clothes as he did. Was it just his imagination, or did the man actually look delighted to see him? No, not focusing on that. He could deal with that foolish fop for later. Right now, he had to be the adult. A quick glance to his old friend sealed the druid's fate. Anyone tries to take this from you without my say-so, you take their hands off. Got it? Kurama rumbled his agreement. None dared challenge him. How could they, when the fox could snap them up in a single bite? Out the corner of his eye, a druid dared to raise her staff. Kurama's tail smacked the fool down, knocking them out cold. Anyone else? None dared strike back after that. Didn't think so. Now let those poor tieflings in. One of them he never knew who moved, and that set off the avalanche. The druids dispersed, muttering sullenly amongst themselves. Right, so that was the grove problem sorted for now. All good, right? Then why was he still so angry? Try as he might, Naruto couldn't make sense of it, neither head nor tails. He'd put a stop to Kaga and that nonsense about sealing off the grove for now, yet he still wanted to fight something. No, more than that, he wanted to show these sanctimonious druids just how weak they truly were. It burned in his BLD, boiling his thoughts in a sticky sweet soup of savagery. Ravage. What on earth was wrong with him? He shouldn't be this angry. Something was affecting him, influencing him, but what? In the end, he entrusted Karlach to see Arabella safely back to her parents. Right now he needed some air somewhere away from all these aggravating idiots. A faint melody caught his ear as he walked away, tickling his thoughts. Words carried to him on the wind. Not quite right, but not entirely unpleasant either. What was that? Grateful for the distraction, he pounced. None challenged him when he found a winding dirt path leading upward and away from the grove. He followed it on a whim until it led him to a lookout point, overlooking the sea. Soon enough, he encountered a lone tiefling sat atop a stone bench. So she was the one singing, whomever she was. She seemed similar to Karlach in that they were clearly the same species, but this one couldn't have been any different. His favorite crimson barbarian towered over most, because she was built for combat. This one, she was tiny. No, perhaps that wasn't the right words. She was certainly smaller. Her horns were sharper for one, her skin a pale blue, her eyes a burning amber frame against black scara. Gentle violet black hair flowed down her shoulders, framing some kind of jolly jester outfit replete with bells and fanciful colors. It suited her. The music and her off-key singing not so much. He pitied the squirrels sitting at her feet. She clicked her tongue and strummed a lute in her hands tentatively, singing slightly off-key, so much so that the poor critters fled before him rather than endure anymore. No, the bard paused, shaking her head. That's not it. He longed to speak up, but felt like he was intruding, somehow, and held his tongue. Her brow furrowed, well and truly lost in her own little world, oblivious to all outside it. Maybe if Naruto tried not to sneeze. He really did. Just couldn't hold it in. Oh, the tiefling jolted, blinked at him, then dared a small smile. I'm sorry, I didn't see you there. Wait, her hellish eyes widened. You're the one that caused that ruckus down in the grove a few minutes ago, weren't you? For some reason that made him smile. You saw that? She grinned impishly. Everyone saw that. Heat flooded his cheeks. Is he friendly? She tilted her head, considering him. That giant fox of yours? So long as I keep him fed? Really now, she batted her long lashes at him, mildly bemused. And what do you feed him besides surly druids? He could have said something snarky or mean to shoo her away, but he just couldn't bring himself to do it. This girl was just so gosh darn nice. He welcomed the chance for a bit of banter, if only to distract himself from the restless rage searing through him. Talking was good. Talking kept him distracted. Thus so he settled for a shrug instead. The occasional idiot seems to keep him content, you know. The nameless tiefling laughed a little at that, then subsided into a sigh. He had to ask, couldn't help himself. Problem? It's just nothing fits, you know, she gestured to her lute. When you finally perfect a song, there's nothing like it, but when you're stuck, and it's just getting worse, there's nothing so cruel in this world. Curiosity stirred in him. Want some help? Her smile was sad, yet he caught the spark of hope therein. It can't hurt, I suppose. I'm Elphira, by the way. Naruto, he nodded in return. Interesting name. She scooted over on her perch, making room for him. I have I have an extra lute if you like. Bad idea, he'd never played an instrument before, why don't you just tell me what the song's about? He felt her sadness become sorrow. My teacher, Lihala. Elphira absently strummed her lute, looking wistful. She loved dancing. Had 2 left feet, mind. I remember waking up one night on the road and seeing her dancing beneath the stars, a huge smile on her face. Thinking of it now, her expression crumpled suddenly as she delved into a particularly unpleasant memory. My heart hurts and my words just seem to crumble like ash. Wait, those infernal eyes lit up a heartbeat later, startling him. Words of mine will turn to ash, that's perfect, he gestured her on. Maybe if I add this here and use that there. Elphira mumbled for a moment, nodded to herself, then stood. Words of mine will turn to ash. Her voice peaked, finding its tune. When you call the last light down, she sought out a new note as she began to play, then another, and before long the music flowed freely. In no time her voice rose to join it in song, no longer discordant and distracted, but smoothly, sweet as honey and thrice as wistful. Naruto closed his eyes and let it wash over him like a cleansing wave, absently tapping one foot to the rhythm. It soothed something in him, quelled the raging beast he'd been grappling with for the last few days. More than that, her voice brought him peace, made him think of happier times. Music really was a wonderful thing, you know. Aleso ended all too soon. Even so, he applauded her the moment she finished. How could he not? And then she burst into tears. Sorry, don't be, that was amazing, thanks. She scrubbed at the back of her eyes with one hand, sniffling. That's the first time I've played since Lihala died. My teacher, she amended gently at his puzzled expression. She was playing her lute and we didn't hear the knolls coming. There was so much BLD. I can still smell it, I'm sorry. What else could he say? He didn't even know what a knoll was, but that just sounded horrible. It was awful. She hiccuped a little, wiped her eyes again, then rallied. I couldn't look at a lute without hearing the screaming. Her head swayed for a moment as she shook herself. I'd forgotten what it was like, that itch to perfect a song. To tell a story. His lips moved of their own accord, quirking up ever so slightly. That's what we do, isn't it? Life's just one big book when you think about it. Yes, she sprang to her feet in a flurry of motion and clasped his hands in hers. That's exactly it, you get me. Had his heart skipped a beat just now? No, surely not. He was fine. Just Fii and Kurama chuckled in his head. Someone has a thing for horned girls? Whoa. The weeping dawn will be my gift to Lihala. Elphira leaned back, still holding his hands, her smile radiant. I've a long way to go, but thank you. I think I needed this. He smiled then, really smiled, for what felt like the first time in ages. Don't worry about it. Elphira's fingers curled around his and, there you are. Karlach bounded their way from around the bend, waving as she went, causing them to jolt apart. Quite the song that was. Really perked me up proper. She took one look at Elphira and grinned, looking like she'd stumbled upon a diamond in the rough. Recruiting a bard for the party already? You've got good taste. He sputtered. Who said I'm recruiting anyone? Elphira made a questioning noise and his face burned anew. Not that I'd mind, I certainly don't. Her tail swayed happily. You were there when I needed it most. If you need support dealing with those awful goblins, well, it's the least I can do. His brow furrowed. You sure? Certainly. Karlach nudged him. Hey, don't knock it until you've tried it. Bardic inspiration is a hell of a thing. You couldn't ask for a better buff. Naruto tilted his noggin, the term sailing over his head. Buff. Oh, Elphira set her fingers to her lute once more. I believe she means something along these lines. Another melody sprang forth, this one softer than the last, The most gentle of lullabies. Exhaustion hit him a second later and his shoulders slumped. He hadn't realized just how stressed he'd been until now, until he had a chance to just breathe, to properly relax in the presence of others. His eyes drooped as he listened to the gentle lull of Alfira's lute, and snapped open with a start. What he saw there made him recoil with a strangled noise. For a moment, he could have sworn he saw BLD on his hands, dripping red so very red. Naruto. Alfira looked at him in concern, no longer strumming her lute. "Are you alright?" "Fine." He shook his head. "Dozed off for a sec, that's all. Nothing to worry about." Poor boy. He didn't know the half of it. Not a jot. Dark would his dreams be that night. Far darker than he ever thought they would be. Because that very night they faced the Blade of Frontiers. Doubt is the greatest villain we face. Greater than demons and greater than dragons. Most people don't find it easy to conquer. Thankfully, we're not most people. Slay your doubt and nothing can stop you. The Weeping Dawn setting up camp soon became a rather busy affair. After having all but single-handedly subdued the Emerald Grove, the tieflings were both delighted to host him and determined to throw a party in his honor. True, the looming goblin threat yet lingered and there were other threats to be dealt with before the refugees could safely depart, but tonight was a night to celebrate, or so Zevler said. Or was his name Kevlar? He couldn't really remember at the moment. Way away too much wine. It didn't matter, he supposed, it was all one and the same to him at this point. Someone he never knew who had cracked open a barrel of the good stuff and he'd been invited to drink. So drink he had. In nearly no time at all, they pitched a series of cloth tents between them with plenty of bedrolls and packs to go around. They'd plenty of bedrolls and packs to go around with food aplenty. Now this once anxious grove, so fraught with tension only a few short hours ago, rang with the sound of bawdy laughter. Magic Roland was quite skilled, glad Karlach convinced him to stay, and much music, all paired with the sounds of scampering children as the adults feast and drank to their heart's content. That said, he hadn't realized quite how many tiefling kids were running about besides Arabella. At least the poor girl still had her parents to look after her, but there were so many orphans here. More than one of them had striking scarlet skin, reminding him of Karlach. His heart hurt to see them alone, kinda made him want to take care of them, adopt them, you know. If he wasn't so tipsy, he might have done just that. He wasn't blind to the rags they wore, nor how terribly thin the lot of them were. This place desperately needed supplies. Another thing to watch out for on his travels. He certainly didn't fail to notice the sullen looks some of the druids gave him either. So what? Let them stare. Kurama had their Idolno ritual for them. Too bad. Really, if they hadn't been so damnably stubborn and insular, there wouldn't have been any need to involve himself in the first place. Wrath was alright at least. He'd be able to hold this place together once he left. Hopefully this Halcyon guy was worth all this trouble. Lost in your head again? He looked up from where he lay as a shadow fell over him, briefly blotting out the full moonlight. He recognized those horns. Kurama creaked an eye open from where he lay. "Oh, do you..." His face burned hotter than Karlach's flames. "Shut up, you." Yelfira plunked down beside him, goblet in hand. Her eyes seemed to glow in the gloom. Some party? Was it just his imagination, or were her cheeks flushed already? If you think this is something, wait until we deal with the goblins and the rest. Anything but that, please. He hid his grimace into his goblet and drank deep, enjoying the sweet taste. This is embarrassing enough already. Those burning orbs of hers fixed upon him. Surely someone's thrown a party for you before. They have, he nodded, recalling one such event. But not often. Hey, he reeled back, startled to find her face inches from his. Why in the hell's not? You're amazing. I wouldn't go that far. Her brow furrowed. It was his only warning before her hand snapped out quick as a lash, grabbed a hold of his tattered collar, and hauled him forward. Her eyes raked over him, keen and assessing. A hero shouldn't wear rags. We need to get you new clothes. Armor, maybe. Damon can get you sorted. He whined a little at the idea of giving up his leisure clothes, ruined though they were. But I like these colors. Then we'll use dye. Her smile was all teeth. There would be no bargaining with her. His shoulders slumped. I don't get any say in this, do I? No, she crooned. No, you do not. An hour later saw him dragged before the bemused blacksmith in question, and Karlach wait, wasn't damnin that infernal mechanic she'd been looking for. Goon on her and his rags cast aside. He left them kicked out in dark trousers with matching boots and a rich amber tunic besides, over which they flung a light elter vest. It wouldn't protect him from anything like an owlbear, they said, but it was fashionable and would turn aside a blade in a pinch. Better yet, they were in his colors once you went orange, and lack you never went back. A bit of bartering got Karlach a new axe and a pair of slightly used gloves besides, while Alfira picked up a lovely-looking amulet. All in all, he considered it a successful shopping trip, impromptu though it was. There was just one tiny problem with it all. What's this then? He whirled, realizing he'd forgotten something most important. Something that was no longer wrapped about his forehead. Something that was currently clutched in Alfira's hands as she peered at it. Oi, gimme back my headband, the bard danced backward, swaying a little from the wine as she clutched his item in question behind her back. Catch me if you can. Karlach slapped his back, singing him a little. You heard her, soldier. Go get it. Suyer, thanks for the help. He most certainly didn't need it, if only because Alfira didn't realize quite how quick he could be when motivated. In no time at all he had her pinned up against a tree, both wrists trapped over her head. The gasp she gave was the sweetest of music. She giggled and squirmed and kicked against him, but it was no use. He gently pried her fingers apart and took the headband out her hands. Mission accomplished, he let her go, satisfied with his prize. All right, fair is fair. You got me. She settled down beside with a rueful smile, looking a little disappointed. Why? Had she expected something else? As her finger threaded through the grass. Hells, what did you do to get that strong? Push-ups, sit-ups, and plenty of juice? Oh, you, she smacked his shoulder. Fine, keep your secrets? And speaking of said secrets, so, what's the real reason you want to join up with us? Her smile flickered for a moment, becoming a touch more tentative. You've, well, inspired me. She looked away, wringing her hands. I want to stand on my own 2 feet to prove that I can be half the bard Lihala was. I want to join you to fight by your side. I want to help people as you've helped me. When he waved her on, intrigued by her idea, she rallied, took a deep breath to herself, and barreled forward. I've been running since Elturel, and when we finally arrived in the grove, we found danger there, too. Unless I hide away from the world, I can't avoid it. So I'd rather face it head-on with you, if that's all right. Kurama all but hooted in his head. She's a keeper, wasn't she? She was just so DMN earnest. What was the harm, really? Sure, she might be a little squishy when it came to close combat, but he and Karlach could protect her if it came to a fight. If she survived. His head ached abominably at the thought, and he shook it away with an annoyed grunt. Fine. He looked away to hide his flush alongside that dark urge. You can stay. Really? She tilted her head. Just like that. He granted her a nod. Just like that. Oh, thank you. She darted in for a quick hug, startling him terribly. Thank you so much. I have more than just bard skills. I can do magic as well. You'll see, I won't let you down, I promise. He didn't think for a second that she would. This girl didn't have a mean bone in her body. Then again, wasn't it the nice ones you had to watch out for? Would you mind playing a little something for me? Her face lit up. I'd love to. In a flash, slung her lute off her back. In battle, she began haltingly, stumbling over the words, and in life, it's normal to hit setbacks in strife. But a setback turns only becomes a failure if you stop trying, then people start dying. He snickered. Wow, that was almost profound. She growled at him, flushing adorably. Don't tease me. It just came to me, alright? He waved her on, letting her refine her new song, listening as her music threaded through the air. He'd never really had a thing for music before this, you know. Sure, he liked it, who didn't enjoy a catchy tune, but he hadn't really realized until it became a constant presence in his life. It soothed the savage beast within him. Speaking of which, he needed to figure out what was causing this. It wasn't Kurama, thanks ever so much for the vote of confidence, but if not him, then what? Or dare he say who? You know, he muttered, I still don't know how I got here to this Fey run in the first place. It's Fey run, you heathen, Karlach hollered at his back. Even I know that. Such a silly goose. She really did make him smile sometimes. Alfira looked his way suddenly, capturing his attention. Her eyes met his as inched closer to him. I was wondering, would you like to a shout pierce the night? We've got company. The moment shattered as the crowds parted around them, revealing a handsome man clad in elter armor, his skin dark, hair close-cropped, and a false eye besides. A rapier was clutched tight in his fist. Whomever he was, he didn't look much pleased to be here. The gentle lull of conversation around them faded to a nervous buzz as he approached. That's the bloody blade of frontiers, Alifra hissed under his breath. Why is he here? And why is he looking at Karlach like you? He moved a finger at Karlach. One horn, the stink of Avernus advocatus diaboli. Oi, she planted a fist on her hip. I look like I got one horn, mate? That brought him up short, if only for a moment. Perhaps not anymore, but I know your face, devil, was worth a try. She shrugged one shoulder and heaved a sigh. Persuasion was never really my strong suit. Well, I'll be goddamned blade of frontiers. Thought I'd shaken you for good. That'll teach me to underestimate you, W. The newcomer wasn't so easily soothed. If anything, her remark made him angrier. Karlach, the archdevil Zariel's gladiator, come to burn the sword coast to ash. Your rampage ends here. Naruto climbed to his feet and stormed on voices as their voices rose. Alfira followed him, clutching her lute close to her sissy. He barely noticed, because he could hear Karlach's voice peaking in distress, see her face twisting in a grimace. Look, mate, I'm not shut it, devil. Out came the rapier to tickle her throat, forcing her hands up. I know your kind, a heart darker than a shadow's nightmares. You'd cut a child's throat just to taste their BLD. As if he knew her, the red haze came on again, stronger than before, shrouding Naruto's vision. His pulse pounded in his ears like the drums of a great hunt out for BLD, drowning out the world at large. Why wasn't anyone intervening? Why weren't they helping Karlach? Why didn't anyone defend her? Were they afraid? That might explain it, but it was also no excuse. Made him sick to his stomach, it did. He buelled onward, eyes ablaze, a low growl building in the back of his throat. Alfira said something, but he didn't hear her. He only had eyes for his prey. His legs cleared the last few steps between them in a rush. The blade of frontiers never saw his approach, and by the time he did, it was too late. He stepped in and yanked WL's weapon arm backwards away from Karlach, ducked the retaliatory elbow and eldritch blast that swept his way, and viciously seized the man by the wrist with his free hand. From there he squeezed until the nerves spasmed, forcing his foe to drop the weapon altogether. Not satisfied, he wrenched the limb behind his back and planted a knee into his spine, forcing him low. You lay a hand on her and the hand comes off. WL's good eye swept his way, wide with rage, but also fear. Who in the hells are you? Naruto barely heard the words. He gripped WL's arm with fresh ferocity, fingers biting down into the meat. A single twist and it would come flying free, disarming the man, quite literally. He wouldn't be much of a threat to anyone then. Just a quick tear and don't? Kurama warned. This isn't you, wasn't it? Karlach had been good and nice and kind to him, and this beast wanted to kill her. You think I'm a bloody devil? Karlach broke the spell with a frustrated noise. I didn't take the blade for a fool. I'm not out. Her and WL both flinched as one as something seemed to pulse between the two of them, linked by some psionic force he couldn't understand. Whatever it was, it laid them both low and left them clutching their heads in awful pain. Baffled by the sudden reprieve, Naruto stretched out his mind toward it, pushed past the rage and seething fury to feel what they were. With his sixth sense, mistakes were made. In an instant he felt the pain and the fire and the heat, saw Karlach tearing through demons with every swing of her axe. It was as if he were standing right there, living it. Proof, WL cried out, triumphant as the vision faded. Clear as summer sky, it's over. Karlach, time to feel the sting of the blade. Naruto twisted his arm further, warping his words into a pained gasp. You want me to tear off this arm, pal? Clam up and don't push your luck. Hey, easy. Karlach tried to touch him, then thought better of it when she saw his blazing eyes. As for you, W, I've tried to tell you not what you think I am. Another vision lanced between the three of them. He saw Karlach cut through yet more devils, Zariel's servants seeking escape. Her words came back to him. She was a victim of the BLD war, not an agent of it. He met her gaze, careful to keep the blade of frontiers pinned, and winced in fresh sympathy for her. She'd told him about her life, but to see what she'd seen, feel what she'd felt, what an awful life she must have lived in the Hells W. Meanwhile balked. By Balduran's helm Ino, he shook his head fiercely. I will not be tricked, you saw the truth. Karlach crouched before him. I may be an effective soldier, but I never wanted to serve Zariel. Legged it the first chance I got, and ran into this blonde bugger here. She winked his way, and that little gesture cut through the worst of his rage just like that. Please don't make us kill you. WL struggled, gasped now as he nearly wrenched his arm clean out the socket. And yet you served, not by choice. The blade of frontiers caught his breath and his lips pursed. Sheer dread twisted his face. He knew he would die if it came to a fight. And yet something drove him on, something he was deathly afraid of, and it wasn't him this time. He could see it in the man's good eye. What was it that pushed him to this? An elbow cracked back into his face, briefly stunning him. Not enough to make him loose his grip, mind you, but enough to rile him all the same. He redoubled his grip. Calm down. No, WL wouldn't have it. Devils cannot be trusted. He dug his nails into WL's other arm, drawing BLD as he wrestled his other arm behind his back. Stubborn son of ashes, not a devil, and you know it. Would you listen to sense? Karlach stopped just shy of touching their irate captive, hands hovering over his ear. This doesn't have to end badly for either of us. You know monsters better than anyone. Can't you look in my eyes and see I'm not a devil? WL slumped in his gasp, the last of the fight draining right out of him. You don't know what this means. You don't know what you're asking me to do. She's asking you to live, you self-righteous idiot. Alfira intruded harshly, voice ringing with magic. Get your hurt out your arse. The poor blade winced as if he'd been stabbed himself. Hey, Karlach held up a hand. No need to cast vicious mockery on the poor guy. He's been through enough. Those glowing amber eyes pivoted back to WL once more. You heard what she said. I don't want to hurt you, and to be frank, I'd rather not find out how the blade got his name. I swear to you, on all I am, I'm not what you think. WL swore and spat into the dirt, then softer now. It almost sounded like a wail of despair. You really are no devil, are you? His head hung low. I've been deceived. Let go, soldier. Was she serious? She couldn't be serious. Naruto DMN near hissed. No way. He tried to kill you. Karlach granted him a gormless grin. But he won't now, will you, I will not, the man muttered. You have my word. Now it is turn not to budge. Come on now, soldier. Trust me a little. Against his better judgment he listened and released him. You make one wrong move and I'm stickin' that blade where the sun doesn't shine, thank the gods. Karlach clambered to her feet. Thought I was gonna have to take your head. The blade scoffed as he found his own footing. You would have died in the attempt. But, he temporized, raising a hand, there have been enough threats today. And I see now that I made an undue scene. He looked about at the tieflings and the irritated druids, and a flush crept up his neck. My apologies. Karlach perked up like an eager puppy. Truce then? Truce. The blade of frontiers bowed his head. I see the good in you, Karlach. I promise not to lose sight of it, even when the hells burn hottest. Naruto released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. The red haze went with it. He'd made a mistake. This was no monster, but a good man. A bit misguided perhaps, but not at all a maniac, not like Kaga. And he'd nearly killed him. He gripped his right hand with his left, squeezing it by the wrist to stifle a tremor, and swore softly. So we're all good then? Alfira asked of W. We are. He actually seemed contrite, the BSRD. My apologies. It shan't happen again. Nothing's to apologize about. Their resident berserker took it in good grace. We've got a spare bedroll about. Find a space and make yourself at home tonight. I shall take that offer. WL granted them a quick bow. Worry not, I'll stay out of your way. He growled back at him. Better bloody be, or I'm sticking that rapier of yours up your. The blade of frontiers didn't need to be told twice. He retreated. Phew. Karlach granted him a toothy grin as WL plodded away. Glad WLL saw sense. Even more glad he decided to stick around. Takes a pretty slick move to track down all Karlach. Slick? Naruto. Couldn't help but snap at her. His temper failed him and he lashed out. You're pretty loud. She took the barb in stride, bless her. You've got a sharp tongue on you. I like it. Now instead of a liability, we've got another friend. Or we will soon anyway. Couple more like him and we'll have a proper party going. Her words brought him some small measure of comfort, but only just. Did she not realize how close they'd come to disaster? I'm still not happy with you. That was too dim and risky, yeah, but what's life without a little risk? Karlach, she only smiled. Hey, turn on that cloak of yours for a second. His brow furrowed, but her request seemed harmless enough. Sure. She made a spinning gesture with her finger. Now turn around and sit down real quick. Why? Just do it, she gestured anew. I want to make up for that little mess just now. Have a little trust. Easy for her to say, what was she up to? Reluctantly, he did as she asked. Now close your eyes. Come on now, chop chop. The instant he did, strong arms encircled him from behind, accompanied by the faint scent of fire, and he found himself drawn backwards into a bruising embrace. Two very warm, soft mounds pressed into his back. Very soft, large mounds, and a waushrieliwasworm heat flooded his face of an altogether different sort. Hey, don't mind me, she cuddled closer, chin coming down over his should. Just getting my fix. Thanks for putting up with me back there. Do you remember how long it's been since I could touch someone? She was testing him. Hadn't she mentioned this before? 10 years. 10 bloody years, came the repressed growl in his ear. Didn't think I'd be able to touch anyone ever again. And now I can. She nuzzled her cheek against him, one of her horns idly butting against his head, yet unable to so much as singe him with his cloak active. 10 years is a long time to be trapped in the hells, you know. 10 years without a kind word, a touch. 10 years alone. And then you come along and wham, her arms tightened around him ever so slightly, possessively even. It might have been the wine, but he felt a little woozy just then. When I look at you, I feel real again. Her breath was warm on his ear now. He could feel her shifting against him, almost clutching him like some human teddy bear. Alive. Gods, I wanna ride you till you see stars. Emotion exploded inside him, a cacophony of wild images that rendered him a stumbling mess. His face flushed anew. Karlach. It's much to his relief and strange regret, she sounded just as surprised with herself as he was. Too soon. Yeah, probably too soon. Her grip on him slackened. Sorry, didn't mean to say that aloud. Must have slipped out. Still something soft pressed against his cheek. Good night, soldier, and thanks. For once in his life, his silver tongue failed him and he let her go, dumbfounded. One arm reached after her but she was gone, vanishing into the crow of tieflings, leaving him to balk. Good night indeed. How was he meant to sleep after that? He didn't fear triumph so much as he did the pitfall of failure. And romance. That was one battle he didn't know how to fight. Sure, he liked Karlach, she was great. But he kinda liked Elphira too, you know. Ride ya until you see stars. Kurama absolutely cackled, the mad BSRD. All the BLD rushed to Naruto's face. He buried his head in his hands and groaned. Ga girls were confusing, right? Screw this. Sleep it was. He closed his weary eyes and immediately fell into a nightmare. 0, 0, 0, kill. The voice thundered in his ears. No, he grit his teeth against the urge. I said kill. Still it hammered at him. Nope. His resolve hardened. I command you to kill. He stood his ground. Not happening. 0, 0, 0. The dawn came and his hands wept BLD. There was a single moment of blind panic when Naruto awoke from his nightmare before he realized the cause. He stirred to find his hands bloody, fingers slick and red with BLD. Where his fingernails had dug into his palms overnight. It was his BLD and no others. His hands were filthy, yet they were also clean, metaphorically speaking. Well, that was good, he supposed. It was nice to know he hadn't gone after anyone in his sleep. With a wince, he willed them to heal and sat up, grimacing all the while. It was slower than it should be, but he had to push more and more of Kurama's chakra to the bloody divots just to make them mend. Your guess is as good as mine. Now, then, any idea what that dream was about? Not a clue. There was point dithering over it, time to face the music. He sat up completely, fearing the worst. No dead bodies awaited him when he looked about. No nothing. That was good, wasn't it? Morning, Soldier Karlach saw him sitting up and sauntered over, beaming ear to ear, clutching a meaty haunch of something in her right hand. You all right there? Breakfast's almost ready. Never better. Telling such a bold-faced lie made him sick to his stomach. Wait, where's Elphira? I don't see her. I'm here. The bard in question materialized from behind a tree and darted over, pan in hand, only to frown at the state of his palms. Oh, know what happened to your hands? It's nothing, he muttered, furling his fingers into firsts and forcing the to heal. Just had a bad dream. Karlach whistled. Must have been one hell of a nightmare if you messed up your hands like that. He forced himself to breathe. Be calm. Victory was his. Wasn't it? The dawn had come. He had resisted whatever this urge was. Whatever whomever was afflicting him with this murderous impulses, it seemed he could control himself, for the most part. That'll call it a relief would have been an understatement. Even now could still feel it simmering in the back of his mind like a mad dog. Yet it was dimmer today, weaker than it had been yesterday. He'd won the battle, not the war, but a victory was still a victory. He'd take what he could get. So, Karlach beamed brightly at him, oblivious to her own close call. Where next, soldier? Elphira turned a questioning look on him herself. That was the question, wasn't it? He looked toward the horizon. There, a distant red speck winged across the treetops. Was that no? Surely it wasn't a dragon. Dragons didn't exist, right? And yet he couldn't deny the itch that sprang to his mind. To the mountains. Oi, 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 you can't just go around fixing Faerun. Who's gonna stop me? A god. Pretty sure some of these so-called gods need a good talking to. Well, I mean, you're not wrong about that, but hey, don't go running off. You blonde bugger, I'm talking to you, you know who. Swooping is bad. By afternoon, the three of them had a plan. After some spirited debate and a rather roundabout breakfast, their destination was decided. They would make for the mountain pass. Apparently he wasn't the only one to have seen a dragon there. Dragons, actual fire-breathing behemoths. He'd never seen one before, never thought they were real, yet here they were, so of course they had to go there first. True, he didn't really understand all this talk about Githyanki this and invaders that, but surely they couldn't be that bad, right? And besides, they could hardly split the part between the three of them now, could they? WL was willing to remain behind and look after the Emerald Grove in their absence should the goblins strike again, but the Blade of Frontiers was just one man, and there weren't enough of them to simply trust in him to hold the line alone, as it were. Besides, he didn't think Elphira or Karlach would much like the idea of braving a dragon alone, much less head-on. Thankfully, with the miracle of shadow clones, they didn't have to. A few plumes of smoke and some rather terribly startled druids later, and they had a sizable force to look after everyone while they were away. It was tempting to simply take that small army and throw them at the goblins themselves, but no. He wasn't about to spam them en masse across the Sword Coast. As easy as it might be to simply mow down every bastion of resistance with overwhelming numbers, that would be so very boring. He wanted to see all the Sword Coast had to offer with his own eyes if he could, Or wait, was it the Swordfish Coast? Bah, semantics. Karlach would be having words with him about that later. Strong words. Didn't take much asking after. Old Zevler was happy to point them in the right direction. Headed to the mountains are we. If you're looking for Githyanki, search for Elika. She went scouting that way after Zora lost his head. Such was the advice they were given by aging Tiefling, and with his meandering directions, alongside a freshly marked map, their little wayward group set out. In all fairness, this Elika wasn't strong to find. They just had to follow the smoke. And the bodies? Friendly sort, this Elika? Karlach put paid to those very thoughts, idly nudging him with an elbow as they passed another corpse, absolutely feathered with arrows from head to toe. Seems the sort to fight first and ask questions later. I like her, whoever she is, she's a demon good shot. Alfira nudged the crimson cadaver with a toe. Let's stay on her good side, shall we? Not all of us can heal the way you do, Karlach winked her way. Just stay behind Mama K, sweetheart. I'll be your meat shield. You what? Their Bard sputtered. I don't need a shield. Dunno, you're looking awfully squishy, Alfira squawked indignantly, and off they went again, squabbling like sisters. Naruto smiled and half listened to their good-natured squabble with one ear, keeping both eyes on the road as they neared to the pass. Kurama didn't let him enjoy the moment. Do you feel that? He did. He had for a while now, and dearly wished he didn't. They were being watched again. Something tickled the back of his senses as they drew closer. For once it wasn't his infernal urges. They were strangely silent, which worried him far more than he cared to admit. A chill shot down his spine nevertheless, because he could feel eyes on them, a watchful presence, almost as though someone were watching them from afar. Something curious. Something silent. Something dangerous. The sensation only grew stronger as they glimpsed the bridge in the distance. Right behind him. A sudden spike of emotion, he whirled, dropped a kwani from his sleeve into his palm and flung it at the interloper, just in time to see a flicker of red light and a smirking face as someone or something teleported away. His dagger passed harmlessly through the mist and wedged itself in the road to the hilt. For a moment, just a moment, he could have sworn he heard the faintest flicker off Lauder. Was that it? The hell was that? Hell's is right. Karlach sniffed, suddenly stoic as stone. You smell that? Sulfur. She pulled a face at the scent. Pretty sure that was a devil. Doubt we've seen the last of whoever that was. Alfira gulped and glanced about, all traces of good cheer gone. Why don't we hurry up and find Alika then, shall we? They found their target soon enough, crouched low over a wooden palisade overlooking a nearby bridge. She was fair of skin, sporting a rather pale complexion really, matched only by her light blonde hair. The latter looked downright striking compared to her twin horns and those BLD red eyes set against tainted dark scara. Idly he noted her elter armor, a strange elter vest bearing blue sleeves paired with dark trousers, but perhaps most notable of all was the long bow upon her back, black as night. A strange chill emanated from the weapon, resonating with him even here. Long bow. More like a great bow. That thing was huge, almost bigger than she was. Judging by her nearly empty quiver and absence of wounds, it looked like this Alika lady knew how to use it. Another tiefling. By the sage, he was just running into them over the place, wasn't he? What kind of mad blessing was this? She didn't notice them, not at first. Her gaze was fixed firmly on a squabble between soldiers and someone below. From this angle, he could just make out a group of soldiers arguing with 5 people clad in strange silver plate. Were those the Githyanki he'd heard so much about? They certainly looked odd enough. Alfira nudged him. Don't be shy, say something. He coughed into his fist in a polite attempt to get Alika's attention, but succeeded only in startling the poor woman. She rounded on them with a hiss, knocking an arrow to her bow in the time it took him to blink. Good reflexes if nothing else. He'd commend her for that much. Not so her response. What d'ya want, Mragresham? She bared her teeth at them in a hiss. Keep back, I know how to handle myself. It was tempting to test her, so terribly tempting. Which was faster? Those icy arrows of hers, or his speed? You're Alika, right? He raised both hands to show himself harmless. Zevler told us about you. Her stance slumped a little. That old fossil's still sputtering about. He is. Alfira poked her head over his shoulder, beaming. He sent us to find you. What? Why would Henna Vermond? I don't want to know. She kept her arrow trained on him, much to his amusement. So you're not looking to make trouble for me like those Githyanki, are you? Depends. Karlach tilted her head. You gonna make any for us? She clicked her tongue. I was a skin him, not you. Rude little thing, aren't you? Once more Naruto found himself the subject of her stare. How confident she was. He could kill her a dozen different ways in the time it took her to fire her arrow. It would be easy, snap off those horns of hers and jam them through her red eyes, cave a pretty red smile in her throat, or maybe he could just break her legs and toss her to the Githyanki. Maybe the dragon would swoop down from wherever it was and devour her. Kurama's voice struck him like a slap, and he took a deep breath to shake his head, belatedly realizing the archer was still waiting for his answer. Nope. He smacked his lips and smiled a sour smile he didn't feel. You have nothing to fear from me. Good. Her bow dipped completely before she slung it onto her back. I've enough troubles as it. She jerked her chin toward the scene unfolding below. Look at that lot down there. She beckoned him closer and ducked a little, crouching down to observe the escalating argument below. Armed to the teeth. And I'm pretty sure they have a dragon. I saw it flying over the trees earlier. Naruto perked up. Dragon? Karlach slapped her forehead. Gods, now you've done it. Elika squinted at her like she'd gone and grown another head. Done what? Alfira smiled softly. Gone and flipped his SW. There'd be no stopping him now. Hey, he whined a little. I'm not that bad, oh please. The bard beamed. You absolute are. Karlach seconded her with a roguish grin. Like a dog with an old bone. He flung up his arms with an exasperated laugh. Traitors, the both of you right. Elika leaned back, eyeing the lot of them like they were half mad. Perhaps they were, to her. In any case, I was looking to get to Baldur's gate by myself, to safety. She risked another glance to the Githyanki below, wincing now as one of them shoved a soldier. Now I've got to find another way around. Take your chances against those monsters if you like. A thought occurred to him just then. Or, if you're looking for help, you could join us. He wasn't quite sure why he made the offer. Maybe he felt sorry for her. Maybe he had a bad feeling about her going off on her own. Maybe he wasn't sure. Regardless, he found himself offering his hand to her. His urges screamed angrily at such kindness, and he stomped them down, careful to keep his arm level, fingers outstretched. What, just trail after you like some camp follower? She scoffed and shook her head. No thanks. I go my own way. Alone. The urge slipped through his grasp in a fur of temper. How's that working out for you so far? Her lips peeled back in a displeased scowl. You got something to say, human? Nothing, besides the fact that you've got a massive chip on your shoulder. Elika reached for her bow, fiery eyes blazing to life. Why I'll feed your innards to the ants before I do that. Istik below them, the argument reached its head in an angry shout, recapturing their attention. One of the Githyanki, paler than the rest, had finally drawn their blade against the soldiers blocking the bridge. As they looked on, she moved it at the sky with a shout, the bright sword gleaming like so much silver, a beacon in the sunlight. And the heavens answered her shout. Look up, that was your last chance. Now burned, they heard the dragon long before anyone saw it. A thunderous whump of mighty wings, so strong it threatened to rend the very air itself. Down it came, swooping out of the clouds, smaller than he had hoped, but no less imposing for it. Those vibrant scales red as BLD, its long neck arching back as it inhaled, and oh dear, swooping was bad and it was going to roast the soldiers. Should probably stop that. Pain agony flooded his skull, driving him down to one knee as he clutched his head. Through roaring ears he heard Karlach call for him. He tried to speak, tried to respond, but all the world had gone dark and blasted all. He just couldn't breathe. His eyes closed for just a second. I see you, and opened them again. A grotesque humanoid shadow loomed over him in the gloom, wicked and warped and twisted. He couldn't see its face, couldn't see much of anything really, beyond its eyes. Those awful, baleful red eyes. Do you think me a fool, boy? It leaned forward, blood-streaked face sneering at him, voice like the rasp of 1,000 bloody knives sinking into so much wet meat. Did you think I would ignore such trespass? Its very breath was fetid, the rot that came with 1,000 deaths. Did you think a few paltry deaths and the druid would satisfy me? But so Kaga had died after all. Feno, not important. He reeled for a moment, then steadied himself. Who in blazes are you? I am Bel, came the rotten reply, baffling him further. And disappointed, is what I am. You haven't killed nearly enough. And oh, it slashed a hand through the air between them. I require much more than this. You are meant to lacerate this world, Not save every soul you see. Do you have any idea who you're talking to? Kurama flooded him with chakra, blazing his body gold. The pain in his skull faded as he climbed to his feet. It's you, isn't it? He grit his teeth against a fresh paroxysm of agony ripping through his head. You're the one doing this. Do methods why I've got a gap in my memories. You will yield. The pain returned, cresting in a wave of red. He grit his teeth against it and stood his ground. Even now you resist. The creature confirmed his suspicions as it scowled down at him, sneering from the shadows. Why must all who carry my blessing disappoint me so? My last child held such promise, but he became such a failure after Oren's meddling. Yet you took it upon yourself to help that poor wretch. To liberate them and grant them peace. It spat the word like a curse. Did you think your actions would come without consequences? No good deed goes unpunished. You're mine now, boy. I will have my due. There is no escape. Bull on that, you want murder. He crossed both arms before his Izzy and stood his ground. I'll kill who needs killing and no one else. The rotten god glared down at him. You have no say in the matter. You are mine, body and soul. I have every say, he snarled right back. I don't care if you cursed me, blessed me, or whatever. I won't do your bidding. This is my body, not yours. Those four twisted arms lashed at him, forcing him to step back or risk being eviscerated on the spot. I am a god, and I've beaten those before. Now get out of my head, scram, little fool. Serrated laughter shook the plane of his mind. The longer you resist, the worse it will become. You will lose control sooner or later. You'll kill that bard, and that hellish tiefling. You will break the blade and drown the sword coast in BLD and so much more. All who dare to stand by your side will die, be it by your hand or another's. You cannot defeat me here. Give in. Naruto crossed both arms before his Iti and snarled. I refuse. The bloody deity growled, baring twisted teeth. You cannot. Can have I'll keep refusing, till the end of time. The mad horror moved itself into his face and screamed obscenities at him, tearing at his mind with its many arms. This time he was prepared. He backhanded it with his right hand, caught one of its limbs in his free hand, and reeled it in as one might a fish. From there he reared back, clenched his knuckles, and reality snapped back with a lurch as he delivered a crushing punch to the abomination's twisted, horned skull. He opened his eyes and found Karlach shaking him. Whiskers. You're burning up, come back, blinking stars out of his eyes. He shrugged her hands off and found himself gleaming gold. Against his better judgment, he looked back to the bridge. No. What was left of it? Of the soldiers, none remained. Only burned, charred corpses. He hadn't known them. Any of them. None of them. But his heart twisted at the senseless loss of life all the same. And there, looming over them like some proud house cat, toying with mice, the red dragon basked in the sun. As he looked on aghast, a slim Githyanki dismounted from the beast's back and chastised his fellow raiders. He looked not quite old but not young either. Was that the word? Strange, these Githyanki. Most were lean and odd-looking, yet the girl sported a rather pale complexion with white hair and bright armor. And the man wore a strange ruby circlet around his head. Did that indicate rank? Or perhaps no, not important. Focus, stop wasting time, bear. The newcomer chastised his people. You're not here to play with the locals. Of course, Kithrekvos, the thus named pale Githyanki bowed her head in acquiescence. We merely sought to know excuses, came the retort. Question, kill, then move on, find the weapon, our queen watches us. Fail her at your peril. Naruto shuddered. Question, kill, then move on. Were lives truly so cheap to these people? Why do that? Why relish in that kind of senseless slaughter? High time these bastards got a taste of their own medicine, he decided. Rip and tear. He grit his teeth, rip and tear. He looked back to Alika. Still feel like running now. You might make it if you start running now. The pale tiefling furiously shook her head. Not a chance. Then welcome aboard. He clapped a hand on her shoulder and marched past her, eyes glowing gold. Get your arrows ready. She mumbled something less than pleasant, but did as he bade. Fine, but I'm not shooting at the dragon. Karlach bounded after him with a merry grin, already drawing her axe. So we're doing this, then? We are. She giggled. Dibs on the dragon, sorry. He walked just a little faster, that one's mine. Alfira heaved a sigh and unslung her lute. Honestly, you two Voss tensed suddenly only a few paces away. He couldn't rightly say why, only that the Githyanki's gaze met his across the way. A sneer curled his lips as he said something to his allies and raised his blade, only to vanish as Kurama erupted into existence, dwarfing his precious red dragon. He felt the moment the man's bravery shriveled up like a lemon in the sun, replaced by awe, then fear. By Mother Gith, what is that? Kurama lumbered forward, casually crushing an errant Githyanki underfoot. Hello, meat. The so-called Kithrak didn't so much run as he did flee, all but flinging himself atop his dragon's back, and, with a cry of to the sky, he turned tail and fled. It didn't save him. Kurama might not be able to fly, not properly, but his reach exceeded the dragon's speed. He batted the beast aside with a clawed paw, rendering the WRM's once grateful flight into a spinning sprawl that ruined one of its wings, smashed it through the trees and sent it careening down the risen road. Pity. He'd have to crush him later. His warriors were not so fortunate. What followed was a slaughter, plain and simple. Voss, you coward, one of the Githyanki raised their crossbow. To arms, Naruto backhanded his head clean off their shoulders. Oops. Hadn't meant to hit that strong. Yes, Karlach bounded past him with a wild whoop and brought her axe cleaving down on an unlucky Githyanki, tearing the poor bee clean in half. This is more like it. She bounded forward under Kurama, cackled in mad glee as she slid between his legs and hammered a third with the haft of her weapon. This is the best day ever. Oh, it's not a competition. Alfira struck up a chord behind them, voice peaking as she sang out a cantrip that felled another in a sizzle of light. One of Alika's arrows whistled past and lodged it in the throat of another, rendering his charge a bloody tumble as he clutched at the bloody. 3 more flew free, finding the vulnerable areas in his armor, and he did not rise again. Soon enough, Naruto found himself alone and facing the pale woman from before. She reeled for a moment before him, but braved her blade in both hands and rushed him. Die, Istik, by my blade, not smart. She turned her back to Karlach in doing so. Errors. Were. Karlach's BLD was up, she was in full rage. Her axe knew no mercy. Down it came in an opportunity attack, sundering Baritha's armor, rending her back and sending her spilling to the floor in a puddle of her own BLD. Even then, the pale Githyanki didn't die, but dragged herself up on one elbow. She sought to rise, only for Ano Arrow to find her knee and send her sprawling with a shriek. The heck did you just call me, Frogface? Frog. The woman bridled. I am no amphibian, I am Bear the warrior of Vlakith, and I don't care. He planted his boot in her ribs and rolled her over, suddenly aware that she was the last Githyanki standing or laying in this case. What was it your boss said earlier? Question, kill and move on. His brow drew down. What kind of life is that? She tried to rise and failed, slipping in her own BL. I won't kill you. His BLD boiled in his veins and his brain ached, but he refused to give in, because he knew she wanted to die. I have questions. As for what happens afterward, that depends on you. Bear the snarled. Kill me you must, or I shall fall on my sword. He crouched before her, frowning. What kind of queen would command that? Lately, she swore, tried to spit at him and passed out in a dead faint at his feet. Sympathy stirred in his tired old heart. Death would be a mercy. And yet Karlach saw the look in his eye and glared his way. No, no, don't you dare. Hey, hey, he cried, flinging up his arms in feigned outrage. I haven't even done anything yet, Alfira scowled. Tell me you're not bringing that Githyanki back to camp? He glanced back to the dying woman. She might know things. Alika hollered at him. And she might run you through. Naruto shrugged one shoulder. Boo it, she might not. He knelt down, stabilizing her. And just like that, the world changed. The mouse smiled brightly, it outfoxed the cat, then down came the claw, and that, love, was that. They do know how to write them in Kormer, don't they? Yo. An infernal interlude. So how are we gonna make our new Githyanki friend talk? Naruto cast a glance Karlach's way. Easily. You say that, but he let her trail off in quiet curiosity as he returned his attention to the large pheasant roasting on the spit before them. It was almost fully cooked now. A few more minutes and it would be a delightful golden brown now. Just what he needed for his plans. They'd made camp quite well, thank you very much. He'd gotten better at this just outside the mountain pass for the evening and made good time of it. Elika had already proven her worth thrice over in that regard. Not only had she managed to rustle up a brace of fine rabbits, but the bird bursting with flavor was but one of two she'd snagged for them. Tieflings had hearty appetites, apparently. Kurama snorted. Among other things. But what's that supposed to mean? Elvira abruptly sat down behind him and plunked her chin down on his shoulder, accidentally butting one of her horns against his head as she rubbed her cheek against his. The sudden physical contact utterly shattered his thoughts. What's the plan? Vicious mockery. Torture. No. His rebuke was mild as he drew back a bit, trying to ponder the confused noise from her. We won't. We're better than that. Are we really? Elika looked up from where she was currently skinning the rabbits she'd caught with a face like thunder. Her people would have happily done the same to you or me if the boot was on the other foot. If they had their way, we'd be dead and in a dungeon by now. She shuddered a little suddenly, doubtlessly recalling her own close call. I definitely would be something twisted in his. Elika, don't worry about me, she returned to her task with gusto, eager for a distraction. We need to find out where all these harassing frogs and their dragons are coming from and more importantly, what they want. Karlach quirked a brow. Besides us dead. Besides that. He elbowed her side with a golden elbow. Then we'll make them deader. Elvira plunked down on the ground with a happy chirp, loot in one hand, bottle in another. Deadest, she tilted her head, shrugged, and necked the bottle. Doesn't matter. Did you see what that fox of his did to that red dragon? She mimed smacking a fly out the sky and slung an arm around a chagrined Elika. One good smack and down it went right into the trees. With something like that on our side, we can do anything. Long live the Dragon Slayer. Not really a slayer, but I appreciate the vote of confidence. Maybe, but Naruto sniffed once and promptly recognized the sweet aroma of wine. Well, that explained a lot of things. Just how many of those bottles did you filch from my pack? Only one. Their resident bard hiccuped, swaying where? She sat. Well, maybe 2 or 3, but I was inspired. Tipsy fingers danced nimbly across her lute, plucking a tune despite it all. How else could I compose your ballad? Whatever comes our way has a nice ring to it, don't you think? Elika groaned and buried her head in a hand and swore in infernal tongue. Mrag, that's so cheesy. Am I in it? Of course you are, the bard hummed happily. Mind you, it's not finished good. She spat on the ground. Don't include the Githyanki. Why not? Karlach chuckled. They're a stubborn lot, it'll take an awful lot of killing to put them down. Should be fun. That said, I'm all for second chances, but I wouldn't go trusting her easily. She jerked her head Baritha's way, still sound asleep at the edge of their camp. She'll probably say anything to get loose. Naruto beamed at her. Who said anything about trust? I know that look, soldier. What are you up to? A most pleasant scent reached his nose. The pheasant was cooked at last. Time to begin. 0, 0, 0. Voss sucked in a ragged breath and opened his eyes. He was alive. And in one piece at that. Fortunate. He certainly wouldn't tell Vlakith of this. 0, 0, 0. Naruto sat before Bertha and gave her a nudge. Credit where it was due, their resident Githyanki awoke quickly. Her slitted eyes snapped open, wild with panic. Said panic became anger as she laid eye on him. She made to surge upright and fight, only to find both her hands and legs bound with thick rope. The result was a rather clumsy lunge that saw her sprawled face first in the dirt. He tried not to smile as he rolled her over onto her back and sat her up against a boulder. Really, he did. He just couldn't help himself. Are you done? That depends. She glared hatefully at him. Have you come to kill me, Istik? His urge stirred. He choked them down and shook his head. Nope. Tiskith, she muttered something in the language of her people and looked away. Then I have nothing more to say. How about thank you? He tilted his head and kept both arms behind his back. I saved your life back there. I will never talk, Istik, you're literally talking right now. Bear the made angry bear the noises and tore her gaze from his with a huff. Unfurling his arms behind his back, he set a plate of piping hot food before the bound Githyanki. Perhaps this will loosen your tongue. Her stomach growled plaintively. She flushed and glared bloody red daggers at him, hissing through clenched teeth. You are a cruel and vile creature. Meh, I've been called worse. Her gaze strayed to the plate. If I tell you where my kin are, you'll give me food. Aha, progress, just so, he kept the smile firmly affixed to his face. You were bested by us, taken prisoner, and left for dead. Tell me, how do your kin treat prisoners of war? She lifted her chin and drew herself upright, no doubt trying to seem bigger than she was. The Gith do not negotiate? As he thought. They'll kill you then. He didn't need some fancy tadpole to link himself to her mind, he could sense her fear. He could see it in the flicker of her ears, hear it in the quickening of her pulse, thick as BLD in mud. She wasn't afraid, she was well beyond that. No matter how convincing her facade might be, beneath it, the poor girl was terrified. Belatedly he realized she was younger than he thought, nearly of an age with him. Probably just shy of her 20s if he had to hazard a guess. The slightest warble in her words merely confirmed it for him. I do not fear death. Yes, you do, he poked her forehead, drawing an outraged noise from her. You're terrified. Of dying. Being forgotten. Her already pale face became paler still, draining of all BLD as he spoke. Don't worry, everyone's afraid of something. I have the same fear. Her lips pursed in confusion. You do. Of course, he nudged her food a little closer and began to carve it open for her. Everyone dies, sooner or later. I've made peace with that. We all want to make our mark on the world, leave our legacy behind before we go. Then kill me, I will die defiant, that will be my legacy. They both knew it was a thin argument. He relished poking another hole through it. I already told you, that option is off the table. Then why are you here? She thrashed against her bonds, to no avail. To torment me. He heard Karlach and Elphira laugh by the fire at something Elika said. I'm here to help, he answered honestly. I tend to make a habit of talking with my enemies after I defeat them. It hadn't failed him yet, he'd made some of his very best friends that way. When she didn't rise to the bait, however, he picked up the still warm plate and scooted closer to her, tucking one leg into his tea as he laid his chin atop his knee. What do you want from life, Bear the Wolf? Fame. Power. Her glare redoubled upon him. What does it matter to an Istik like you? Sage, save him from willful women. Humor me. She bared her teeth at him. I longing only a silver word and a red dragon, to honor my queen Vlakith. Please, he snorted. Your queen doesn't even know your name. Lies, she tried to headbutt him and failed spectacularly. I live only to serve her, the same queen that would command your death because you failed her. She winced. It is our way. The strong survive and the weak perish. By that very logic, mercy is a virtue of the strong, isn't it? And no, she faltered a little at that. It is weakness. But if I'm weak, then how did I best you? Her mouth opened to refute him, only to closed. Closed again. He could see the paradox twist through her mind as blind dogma warred against pragmatic strength. Just what kind of upbringing did these Githyanki have, did she have, that had warped her so? Maybe visiting this creche should be a priority after all. I pity you. Truly he did. It must be a terrible thing to live with such a cold heart. I do not need your pity, Istik, he bobbed his head. Yet you still have it all the same. Fool, her lips peeled back in a sneer, but it lacked the earlier rancor of before. Your kind heart will be the death of you. Hasn't killed me yet, so you wish to rush headlong into death. Very well. She bared her teeth at him, rather reminding him of a small puppy that had been kicked one too many times. My kin dwell in the mountain pass. They will strip the skin from your bones, doubtful. He could probably wipe that creche out himself. With Karlach, Elphira, and Elika backing him up. He'd wipe them out if it came to a fight. Did he want to slaughter them, though? That was the question, wasn't it? He hadn't even met any of Baritha's kin yet, but already he felt his temper rising at the thought of them. To be so slavishly devoted to a distant deity, to become so cruel, to have such a vicious outlook on life as to quench any and all concept of kindness, it was wrong. His urge burned at the thought of ripping them apart, and for that reason alone, he resisted for now. They can try, he settled for a smile instead. Bertha looked fit to spit, but held herself in check. Will you release me now? Once I'm certain you're not lying. She wasn't, but some small part of him was reluctant to let her go in the dead of night. Here he nudged the plate her way. Your meal. Only then did he remember that her limbs were still bound. She could hardly eat as she was now, unless she wanted to feast like a dog. Perhaps sensing that very thought, she scowled at him. I do not need you to feed me. Would you? Rather Karlach do it. His favorite berserker made a menacing show of cracking her knuckles across camp and acting scary as planned. Bertha blanched. Not the red woman, why not? She crooned. Afraid I'll feed you your teeth instead? The Githyanki girl took one look at the flames crackling around her and whimpered, all her bluster dissolving like so much morning mist. Away, devil, I'll not be tempted. Karlach winced a little, her act falling through. Devil. Oi, now, I know I look the part, but I ain't one. No need to call me a bear. That didn't seem to hear her. She lurched backwards, eyes rolling in her head with a yelp and both feet besides, kicking up dirt in her haste to escape. But she couldn't, not with her limbs bound. All she accomplished was panicked flailing. It was utterly at odds with the scowling, callous warrior he'd entreated only a few seconds ago. That was raw fear he felt from her, delectable and delicious, just like the BLD of his enemy's stop. He throttled his urge before it could rise to the fore once more. Fear like this was not something to be celebrated, no matter the cause. When he looked back to the Githyanki, he found her babbling openly, shaking her head to and fro as she tried to crawl away. You're not real, no, not real, leave me alone. Alfira and Elika dragged Bertha back, bless their horned heads, but their aid only drove the girl wild. She flailed like a hellcat between them, snarling and shrieking and screaming until the latter finally lost their patience and flung her down at their feet, rendering her insensate. Even then the Githyanki kept muttering to herself, refusing to look at Karlach. Eyes on the sky, she babbled madly to herself, gazing down at her hands as they looked on. Don't cry, or you'll never fly. There was something to those words, a shiver of power that threaded through the air. What kind of rhyme was that? Alfira eyed the trembling Gith with pity. What's gotten into her? No idea. Elika nudged her with a toe. She's clearly gone mad. Naruto held back a pained grimace of his own. I'm sensing a story here. Probably is one, Karlach muttered, stepping up beside him. Devils like to screw with people and they're not picky about who. One of them probably got her good. That was putting it mildy. One look at Karlach's fire had reduced her to a quivering mess. Clearly there was something going on here, to say nothing of her sudden rhyming spree, but what? He crouched down before the crazed warrior. She's not going to hurt you. No one is. Bertha covered her head with a wail and convulsed when she lay. Lies, lies, lies filled with knives to stab, to hurt, to cast me into the dirt. I ain't lying. Naruto tousled her hair. We're all good people here, you know. Elika grimaced. Bloody Mragrashams lost her mind. She didn't even seem to hear them. She kept babbling. Raphael, he'll drag me to the hells at the sound of a bell. You say the nicest things, Bertha. The groveling Gith shrieked and dove for cover. Naruto pivoted, placing his weight on his right heel, and well that he did, because a sudden presence assaulted his senses. Not a heartbeat later, a well-dressed man appeared before them, clad in a cloud of fiery sulfur. Karlach hissed out a breath. Shit, he couldn't blame her for cursing. The newcomer was kitted out in the finest of finery, dark hair slicked back and greasy as his smile. Everything about him instantly set him on edge. He smiled as he emerged from the flames, but it was not a kind one, rather the half-sneer of something entirely inhumane, a being who pretended to be mortal, but was something so much more. Why was he magnet for troubles these days? Kurama bridled. Don't trust him. As though he need be told that. My, the stranger hummed at them, sparing a glance for their camp. What manner of place is this? A path to redemption or a road to damnation? strong to say, for your journey is just beginning. His gaze strayed to Berth, still prone and quivering in the dirt, and his smile became a touch sharper. Well, if it isn't the Gith. How pleasant to see you again, Berth. Thank you ever so much for opening the door for me, as it were. Berth howled into the mud. Naruto edged forward. What did you do to her? Why, I helped her, of course. The newcomer looked to him with a wry smile. That's what I do, you see. Our cowardly friend here desired courage, you see. He nudged her with a boot, delighting in the noise she made, and I, generous soul that I am, gave it to her. The price was a simple lullaby, to be recited at a time and place of my choosing should said courage ever falter. Thank you for that, by the way. A sly wink followed. You did more to break her than I ever could. Disgust roiled within him. Let her go right now or I'll feed you your teeth. The stranger shrugged. What's the harm? She's served her purpose. I'll release her. Consider her my gift to you, from one kindred spirit to another. He reeled back despite himself. Kindred spirit. But of course, the stranger brought his hands together in a sardonic clap. Bargains are our bread and butter, my friend, and words, our power. Truly, I admire that silver tongue of yours. I don't suppose you'd be willing to part with it. Right? Karlach hefted her axe. I've had enough of this. Who in the hells are you and what do you bloody want? How rude of me. Quick as the snake he was, the man pivoted back to her. Wherever are my manners? Well met. The man sketched a courtly bow, the very picture. I am Raphael. Very much at your service. Beside them Naruto was distantly aware of Elvira crouching down to grab the Githyanki. After a moment's pause, Ilika joined her. Stall for time, he decided. Let the BT talk until you know what he wants, what would suit the occasion. The words to a lullaby perhaps. Raphael's rich, resonating voice took on a bemused edge as he curled a hand in the air. The mouse smiled brightly, it outfoxed the cat, then down came the claw. His hand swept down with it, and that love was that. He laughed at his own joke. They do know how to write them in Cormer, don't they? And which are you? He quirked a blonde brow. The cat or the mouse? Neither, their guest hummed. The fox, rather, hiding in a word, a silent observer, about to break the silence. Of course, what I have to say merits some privacy as well as some more, let's call it, refinement. This quaint little scene is decidedly too middle of nowhere for my tastes. Perhaps the three of us should retire to somewhere more secluded. He felt the sudden upswing of power before Karlach did and burst forward. Raphael merely smiled. No need to be so eager. The world lurched and his vision blurred. Reality reasserted itself with a start, bringing with it the awful stench of sulfur once more. As his vision cleared, he realized their camp was nowhere to be found. In its place, a lavish dining room awaited him, replete with a crackling hearth and large table lined with food fit for a feast. It was a picture straight out of a palace. A myriad of tantalizing scents tickled his nose and trembled at his tongue, promising the most decadent of delights, if he simply gave in and look alive, soldier. Karlach's voice reasserted reality. We're in the hells. This slick prick had dragged him and Karlach somewhere else. Elvira and Ilika were nowhere to be seen, nor was Berth. The Midliof somewhere. Much better, wouldn't you agree? Smug didn't even begin to describe this oily BSTRD. Welcome to my house of hope. He gestured to their surroundings with a grand gesture, smug as can be. Where the tired come to rest, and the famished come to feed lavishly. Go on, partake. A hand waved to the feast before them. Enjoy your supper. After all, it might just be your last. Cheeky prick. Fine, two could play that game. He ripped a knife from his sleeve and slammed it through a loaf of bread, just to spite him. Not easily cowed, are we? Raphael took the silent retort in stride. I find it makes the next part that much more entertaining. Before his very eyes the man burst into flame and became something more. His tan face burned a bright, ghastly red as his eyes became twin smoldering coals in his skull. Wicked horns sprouted from his head, and by the sage those wings a devil. The name burst to the forefront of his mind, rattling him. So this was what they looked like. Double SHT, Karlach muttered under her breath. A cambion. Just our luck, the hell's a Cambion. Am I a friend? Raphael thumbed his chin with a fiendish chuckle. Potentially. An adversary. Conceivably. But a savior. His horned head tilted to the side, regarding him intently, grinning ear to ear. That's for certain. Right, he knew where this was going. Listen, buddy, if it's my soul you're after, how much is one's soul's worth, really? Raphael interjected with a smooth smile. A rhetorical question, but allow me to answer. Hers, he looked to Karlach, who bridled under his stare, is currently worth very little with a tadpole in her head. One skull, 2 tenants, an engine about to burst, and no solution in sight. Sad, isn't it? And you want to help us, he asked. You wound me. Raphael feigned pain and reeled back. And here I thought you had a taste for the infernal, given all the tieflings you've surrounded yourself with. Looking to father a bunch of half-breed children, are we? I suppose that's one way to cement your legacy. Heat seared up the back of his neck. You're mad if you think I'll make a deal with the devil. What is madness but a denial of reality? His host hummed in reply. I've a feeling you'll change your mind. A hellfire I winked his way. Before a certain blood-starved murdergid changes it for you? Yeah, nope, nuhu, not happening, and no. I don't want anything to do with the devil. Don't you? Rafie's sly smirk said he'd handed him the advantage. A tadpole you may lack, but you have problems of your own. That urge of yours will render you a mad slobbering mass. And you, little tiefling. He turned to Karlach, I wonder which will kill you first. That infernal engine or the tadpole in your head. Why, you go right ahead, shop around. He sneered the words, beg, borrow and steal your way through Faerun. Exhaust every possibility until none are left. And when hope has been whittled down to the very marrow of despair, that's when you'll come knocking on my door. Here at last he cackled at them, powerful enough to rattle the room. Hope, ha, such a tease, Karlach scoffed and planted a fist on her hip. That's what separates us from the devils, soldier. They think our greatest strength is a weakness. Raphael sneered at her. Because it is. It makes your kind so terribly predictable. Enough, all that asinine arrogance dissolved into a startled gurgle as he stepped in, grabbed him by the throat, whirled around, and slammed him face first into the ground. Funny thing about hope, he snarled down at him. It's stronger than fear. And guess what? When the sinister scheme tried to speak, he pressed down, rendering his response a rasp. So give me one reason not to tear your scheming head from your shoulders. The beater didn't resist, but rather raised hands and managed to grin at him, unfazed by the pain. By all means, bite the hand that feeds you. He looked past him to Karlach. All those pretty little symptom-sundering skin, dissolving guts, tentacles in your mouth, they haven't manifested yet, have they? When she flinched, his laughter redoubled. One might say you're a paragon of luck. I'll be there when it runs out. Until then, you can't afford to kill me. Something snapped in the back of Naruto's head. It felt like his temper. Or his mind. That was probably a bad thing, wasn't it? His fist swung down. The Cambion tried to twist aside and snap his fingers at the last instant. He did not entirely succeed. Rather than roundhouse Raphael as he'd first intended, Naruto seized upon a fit of visceral inspiration. Grabbing one of his twisted horns, he snapped it off at the base and drove it deep into the dastard's belly. The roar of pain that followed was the sweetest of music and sent a red haze draping over his vision, feeding the urge within him, frenzying it to a feverish degree. For once, he didn't have the strength to resist it. For once, he didn't want to, not here, not now, not with him. It felt like something Baal was agreeing with him, urging him on now, a voice in his ear rip in tear. Until it is done. Just this once. When Raphael tried to speak, he gave the horn an unholy wrench in the wound, drawing a fresh paroxysm of agony from his victim. Fresh blood spattered up, scorching his face. It burned hotter than hellfire. Not good enough. He wanted him to scream, to squeal, beg for mercy, so he stabbed him again. And again. When the injured evil tried to cast a spell with one hand, he stabbed that too. Kurama was shouting something at him, and Karlach too, but he couldn't hear the words through the ringing in his ears. Raphael gurgled wetly. You will regret this, would he? Nope. Not likely. He ripped the horn from the devil's gut one last and reared back for the finishing blow, only for the House of Hope to vanish in a rush of fire. It took his prey with it, leaving him kneeling in the bloody dirt, clutching his ill-gotten gains in hand. He blinked, realizing he'd not only been rudely returned to camp, but denied his kill. A fresh snarl tore out of him as his temper sparked anew, maddening him further. Hardened soil burst before his knuckles, tearing a shout from him as he doubled over. Damn it, he'd been so close, just a little more and he would have been dead. Elvira and Alika were on him a heartbeat later. Or rather their hands were. They must have seen the BLD on him and panicked. What happened? Where did you go? He thrashed in their grasp mindlessly. Alika yelped, struggling to hold on. Calm down, Mragresham, you're safe. Through ringing ears, he heard Elvira snap at her. Don't take that tone with him, or you want to hold him down yourself, then? He couldn't answer them, he was too busy choking down the urge to murder and maim and massacre. Karlach swore suddenly and stomped off, practically spitting sparks. A duck all the ducks. Ironically, it was her tantrum that broke through the haze. But he wasn't the only one suffering. She was probably scared out her mind. Breathe. Kurama's voice was likewise a balm to his raging, ragged nerves. It's over. That BSTRD won't be back for a while, if at all. With a supreme effort of will, he forced his hands to unclench. Raphael's broken and bloodied horn slipped from his grasp, tumbling to the ground. He should probably keep that. Might be useful later. Drawing himself upright, he took a quick breath and exhaled. Elvira wasn't letting go of his left arm, and Alika had a hold of his right, which helped, but he didn't want to be touched right now. It wasn't safe. He didn't trust himself, he might break them or worse. Fine, he shrugged. Them off. It's not my BL, I can tell. Alika sniffed, then winced. You reek of the hells. Karlach roared in the background and broke a barrel with her bare hands. Elvira nudged him, bless her. You can tell us the full story come morning. Why don't you sort her out? Ha. Alika balked. But I want to hear what happened now. The tipsy tiefling smacked her arm. Let's make sure our prisoner doesn't bite off her tongue first. Bear the groaned into the ground, foaming at the mouth, quite forgotten. As they squabbled over her, he staggered over to Karlach. She saw him coming straight away. Even in her frenzy, she was at least aware of the world, unlike him. He wasn't surprised when she whirled around, thrashed her tail once against the ground, and opened her arms to him. Hug. The word was both demand and plea, a wilting whine, a cry for comfort from one horribly wounded soul to another. Naruto thought of all the reasons he should refuse, then shrugged. Sure, why not? She wouldn't break easily. And he needed this too. Kurama didn't begrudge him that. He flared his chakra cloak and stepped forward as she did. In hindsight, he wasn't entirely certain who reached whom first. Karlach lunged forward to meet him and he mirrored her. Quite suddenly he found himself in her arms and she in his, holding tight. They were a mess, the both of them, spattered in demon BLD, and far from clean. It should have been terrible. Quite awful really. And yet it felt good. This close, with his face all but pressed into her heaving bosom. Why was his face so warm? He felt her raging flames dance harmlessly across his sin, just as he could hear the heavy hammering of her infernal engine. It sounded strained. Tired. Weird. They needed to find her some infernal iron, and sooner something terrible might happen. His arms tightened around her unbidden at the thought, and much to his surprise she reciprocated, clinging on with all the fearsome strength of a barbarian. His back popped pleasantly and his urge snarled one last time, but couldn't muster up the fury to manifest. Karlach bent down and laid her chin atop his head, practically nuzzling his hair with her face. It's been a hell of a day, huh? A rusty laugh tumbled out of High. That's putting it mildly. You went kinda crazy back there with that devil. What was that about? By the log, how was he going to explain that? It's complicated. I'll tell you later. Sounds good. And thanks. She released a deep, shuddering breath. I needed that. You good? Not really. Me neither. She let him go, whirled away and began pacing, shoulders shaking with narrowly repressed rage. Can't believe that devil just took us into the hells with a snap of his fingers. And after I swore I'd never go back there, too, if I see him again, I'll wring his neck. Raphael was his name, right? She was babbling now, they both knew, but he let her vent, knowing she needed to, and she appeared grateful for it. He's trying to lure us into a game he knows we can't win. Well, I'm not playing. Glad you're not either. She paused suddenly, considering him anew. You know, I've never had someone fight off a cambion for me. There it was, the heat burning the back of his neck again. First time for everything. He felt her approval skyrocket, and oh dear, she really was staring at him now, was going to get tongue-tied at this rate. Blindly he flailed for a new topic. So about the other night, what about it? Karlach fidgeted and kicked at the dirt, creating a small plume of dirt. It was strangely adorable for someone so toweringly tall. What was it about that which endeared her to him so? She wouldn't look him in the eye. No, she suddenly seemed intent to look anywhere but at him. One of her hands fiddled with her restored horn. The other fidgeted restlessly at her side. All the while, her tail twitched restlessly behind her. Well, he began, it's just oi. Can you at least look at me when I'm talking to you, for crying out loud? She muttered a little under her breath and looked away. Was she being shy? By the log, she was cute. Her eyes fluttered shut and open in a blink so rapid, he nearly missed it. Crap baskets, he'd gone and said that aloud, hadn't he? She leaned in. You say something there, soldier. Kurama started to laugh. He bit his lip. I knew it. A dopey grin bloomed across her rosy red face. You called me something just now, didn't you? Well, come on. Don't be shy. Out with it. What did you call me? Adventurous. Brave. Crass. She puffed out her CST with pride. Go on, I can take your best shot. Kurama was of no help at all. He'd begun rolling around in the seal, such was his mirth. Ball to it. What did he have to lose? I said you were cute. Karlach sputtered. Cute. No, no, no. She shook her head fiercely and idly. He noticed something. Her hair had begun to grow out on her right side again. It was a good look for her. Flustered even more so. I don't do cute. Guts and gore galore. Sure, I'm your gal, but cute? He shrugged a shoulder helplessly. You're the... Karlach made embarrassed Karlach noises and squeaked. You did not just say that. Why are you getting so flustered about this? It's just this as well. No, you're different. She clasped both hands just below her stomach and began to wrangle them. It really was adorable watching someone so tall squirm like that. You're the first person I've been able to touch in ages, and I don't want to louse this up like I do everything else. I'm just excited is all. She looked like she might reach for him again, then, but thought better of it. I want to touch you, I want you to touch me. A shiver passed through her, one of longing or need, he wasn't entirely sure, but he saw it all the same. Gods, I want that more than anything. She took a breath and stepped back, visibly restraining herself. But I've seen the looks Elvira gives you when you're not looking. Elika only just joined up with us, too. She shrugged a shoulder toward her fellow tiefling, currently fussing over a prone bear. It's not fair for me to hog you all to myself, not when I'm like this. A fist thumped her. Just save a little for me. His heart twisted. Oh, he wasn't used to people coming on to him like this. What should he say? What could he say? Well, get that engine of yours fixed. Or removed. I promise. I'll hold you to that, soldier. She winked his way. She gave him a crooked grin suddenly, amber eyes flitting up and down the length of him. How long can you keep that cloak of yours up for? Hours. Kurama practically wheezed. He all but flushed in response. While Karlach leaned in. Even while you're asleep. I mean, maybe. I've never really tested that out. Closer still, now did she lean. But you could do it in a pinch. With that friend of yours. Maybe. Good to know. Her lips curled, just so, and he could almost feel them on his. I'm gonna do something stupid now. Hope you don't mind. Her mouth pressed against his, quick and fleeting, hot enough to briefly burn him even through the cloak. His eyes widened, but Karlach was a barbarian of her word, retreating far quicker than her namesake. Her smile was small, fragile even. When she stepped back, her eyes half-lidded, and he knew in that moment that if he pursued her here and now, she would absolutely jump him. She reached out and touched a hand to his. "Remember me, okay?" Her piece pivoted and strode back to her bedroll. He didn't miss the way she pumped a fist and hissed in triumph. "Yes, take that, Zariel." He found himself reaching out after her. "Hey, Karlach." She turned quickly, eyes eager. "Yes." Elika hallooed an alarm, shattering the moment. "Battle station, somebody's approaching." Alfire pitched backward with an angry oath, nearly choking on her meal. "What is it with this night? First we've got a crazy gith, then a devil, what is it now?" A rather dazed cleric as it turned out. The first thing he noticed was her dark hair, black as a raven's feather, bound in a ponytail behind her head. Next came the bright eyes and the scar on her face, currently twisted in a most pensive expression. By contrast, her armor was in dire disrepair. It was well made, but battered and dented, dirty too. Firelight flickered across her mangle breastplate. She'd seen better days. And right now, she saw them. "You're here," she mumbled in a daze. "Just like she told Meend with a band of tieflings. I should have figured." She looked between them, swaying on her feet. "It took me so long to find you. I wandered the wilds for 3 days, right? This one was clearly a few arrows short of a full quiver." He palmed a knife to his hand. "And you are?" "Quiet," the strange girl flung up a hand, more a plea than a shout. "I can't concentrate with all these voices, just listen." She advanced, rambling on, and he listened, spellbound. "Her whispering won't let me sleep. She keeps pushing me to you. Even when I'm awake, I dream." The whispers. Always the whispers. Her fingers twitched toward a knife in her belt, ready to draw. "She's been in my head ever since I can't remember. She brought me here." Out came the blade with a rasp of drawn steel. "I keep thinking about the knife going deep." She gazed down at the curved edge, hand trembling around the leather-wrapped hilt. "It's the only thing she wants me to see. And I think she'll stop once I've dealt with you." Poor girl. She was even worse off than he was. He pitied her to. "You can't kill me just because this voice told you to." "I have to." Her voice peaked in despair. "They won't be quiet." Elika knocked an arrow to her bow. "I can fix that." "Oh." Naruto held up a hand. He opened his senses to the strange girl and winced at what he found there. A chorus of harsh, relentless whispers in her head. All from one voice. A singular command, echoed over and over, soft as a whisper, yet harsh as thunder. "Seek the boy." It wasn't Baal's voice, but it was just as loathsome. Was it another meddling god? Who is this one? He pulled back. "This isn't you. Someone's controlling your mind." Her face writ with anxiety. "Then how do I make her stop? What do I do if not kill you?" The answer seemed obvious, even to him. "You can stay here." He gestured to an empty bedroll by the fire. "We'll watch over you while you sleep. We can figure out the rest come morning." "Stay." The world seemed to shock the girl. "I can stay." She's a little quieter now. Is that what she wanted? She swayed as she spoke. A puppet cut loose from its strings and collapsed bonelessly at their feet. Karlach heaved a sigh. "You sure know how to pick him, don't you?" "Me? No, never mind that. Let's see if she's all right." They hadn't even gotten her name. Time seems so infinite when you're young. A month is an age, a year is a lifetime. It is a strange feeling, to realize how little of it one might have left. In the end, one must make the most of what one has. All that remains of us in the end is our legacy. The lives we touch and those we leave behind. "I can fix her." Interlude of Orin. Orin dreamed of rapturous red. Lovely bleeding red. Her favorite color. She loved the running of red rivers, of scarlet streams, of baleful blood pouring down the fetid remains of her fallen. She dreamed such a dream of carving another corpse in the glorious temple of Baal as she waited for her father's command. For the chance to carve her knife deep into the meat flesh of her next victim. But this time Mighty Skull was silent. In her dream, its eyes did not glow. His great raspy voice did not lacerate her senses. He did not commune with her. She could feel his presence all around and in this place, yet for all that he did not come. No, tonight there was calm. Orin did not like the calm. Calmness meant she had time to think, and when she tried to think, her thoughts went to bad places. She didn't like the bad places. They made her think of Mother. Wretched, awful mother who tried to kill her. Carve her up, cut apart her corpse? Ah, come on. A voice called out just behind her. Where the heck am I now? In a dream. Am trying to sleep here. Orin jolted to her feet to face the intruder, unafraid. She expected a knight in their shiny armor or a rogue steeped in shadows. Instead she found herself balking at a blonde boy, whiskered cheeks, blue eyes and tawny blonde hair, all, his face drawn in a slight smile. His armor looked weak. A knife would punch right through her. And yet for all that, he exuded a strange sort of presence, a familiarity she couldn't quite recognize. What have we here? She brandished her knife at him, netherstone glowing within. A foolish fox come into my lair. More meat to rip and red. Imagine her surprise then, when he took a hold of her knife pointy end first and forced it down, heedless of the blade biting into his flesh. He smiled at her. First Kurama dreams of Gortash, now I'm dreaming of you. Must have done something to piss this world off. Impudence. More flesh words from a silver tongue. She lifted her chin to glare at him. You speak to Orin the Red. Who are you to invade my dreams? Nobody. Orin blinked. Nobody. Yup. The stranger planted both hands in the pockets of his trousers and smacked his lips, producing an audible pop. Nobody of nowhere. He offered her his right hand. Nice to meet you. His piercing gaze drilled into her and seemed to sear her very soul, revealing parts of her she had no longing to see. Wanna be friends? Orin lopped his proffered hand off at the wrist, where it fell to the temple floor with a wet splat. Nobody heaved a sigh, regarding the spurting scarlet stump. Was that really necessary? I ain't here to fight. I don't even know where here is. As she looked on aghast, his fallen hand rose up and reattached itself to his arm in a grisly simulacrum of her efforts. He was toying with her. Teasing her. Tormenting her. Did he think this a game? She could see the gleam in those sapphire eyes. He wasn't afraid of her. But why wasn't he afraid of her? He should be. Screaming, shaking, sniveling in his boots. She could kill everyone he ever knew, everyone he ever loved, and wear their faces. He stood on his knees, prostrating himself before her, begging for mercy. You do not fear me. Why would I fear you? He smiled, and there was something about it, something dangerous that set her on edge. This is a dream. I have nothing to be afraid of. Ah, but the reverse applied to her. She sniffed him. You smell of bile and BLD. Lakin. You wish to rip and rend, to tussle and tear, like me. Maybe. He shrugged a shoulder. But I'm not like you. No one is like me. She spread her arms wide, glorying in the BLD still dripping from her hands. I am Baal's chosen. Father loves me. Nobody stared at her for a long moment, considering her as one might a plinth of majestic marble. She wasn't prepared for the sound he made. It was not a sound of derision nor agreement, or even a plea for mercy in the face of her brilliant beauty, but somehow far worse. Laughter. A short, sharp, sad sound burst from his lips as he shook his head. Is that what you believe? Something in his voice made her shiver, but he didn't give her the chance to speak. His hand lashed out, seized her by the face, pinching her cheeks together. He's been whispering to me lately too. Seems he doesn't love you as much as you think. Something cracked in her. Liar, tricks and deceit. He does love me. She slashed at him in a frenzy, intent on severing his arm again, only for him to catch her wrist and shove her back. The very gesture rippled with contempt. Orin, was it? You're someone I sympathize with, not someone I'm afraid of. Understand the difference. She glared at him. I do not fear you, whispered one. Maybe not, but you will respect me. I am a chosen of Baal. A giant golden paw slammed down upon her from on high, crushing her flat against the stone. Something snapped in her back and she felt 3 of her ribs shatter outright. Gawping, she found herself face to face with the golden lupin visage of a great fox, its mighty maw mere moments from clamping down on her skull. It glared at her. She was stricken speechless. And I'm a chosen of Kurama. The so-called nobody declared, still wearing that insufferable smile of his. Feel the difference. Anger and pain gave her the strength to speak, however briefly. You will not silence me, Shu. He held up a hand to do just so. I don't have to. Do you hear that? Through a haze of agony, she cocked her head. I hear nothing. Yup. His head bobbed. Nothing. Where is your god now? Oren's throat closed. Father would not abandon her to this wretch, surely. Father loved her, didn't he? But I can hear him. Nobody dug a finger into his ear, smile becoming a touched pained. He's whispering to me right now. Telling me to kill you and take that shiny stone when I find your corpse. Won't shut up about it, you know. He says you're weak. That you served your purpose. Her resolve cracked. Liar, and yet father did not speak to her. She called for him, but all she received was silence. I don't lie, now nobody's smile became sad as he crouched down before her. The way I see it, your god ain't loyal. You might be loyal to him, but he sure as hell ain't loyal to you. He already wants to cast you aside for newer, stronger model, not because you've failed in whatever this is, he gestured to the temple around him, but because you've only ever been one thing to him. Shut up, shut up, shut up, she thrashed against the mighty golden limb holding her fast, to no avail. Silence your silver tongue upon. His words made her quiver. She felt small. She wanted to curl up into a ball. Lies, you've done something, you're blocking him somehow. Nobody deftly pried the knife from her dream fingers, despite her best efforts to hold on to it. She waited for him to set it against her throat, and he did. Steel kissed her jugular. Furious tears burned in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. None of this was real, it was all a dream, a trick. She could not die here, she mustn't, this was not her destiny. Maybe I should kill you. A small, broken sob escaped her throat. But then again, he wants me to do that, doesn't he? The knife left her neck. She saw him toss it aside, heard it clatter to the floor. Now he mocked her with mercy. Was there no end to the humiliation she must suffer? Look, Oren, was it? The blond man who claimed to be nobody laid a hand upon her head. She glared him and so failed to see the strange mark he left there upon her pallid flesh. I'm not quite sure why I'm here in your dream, but I'm bettin' I'll wake up any second now and this'll be nothing more than a bad memory for me. Probably won't dwell on it too much. Karlach would probably tell me to kill you and be done with it. But you, Oren glared tearfully at him, still anticipating the killing blow. He didn't budge, the damnable blonde buffoon. End me, then be done with it. Nope. In a smolder of golden cinders the massive limb holding her down vanished, allowing him to take her by the hand and haul her upright. She hadn't the strength to resist him. If he wanted to kill her on her feet, then so be it, just let it end and this damnable humiliation cease. He drew her into a warm embrace. Her mind fizzled out. She'd never been hugged before. It felt nice. I've decided. Naruto drew away far too soon and planted a hand on her shoulder. I'm gonna fix ya. The changeling sputtered in abject confusion. Fix me? Yep. You clearly need a friend. See you soon. The dream shattered like sharp glass. Oren awoke with a snarl. Even then, she did not hear father's voice. Snarling, she kicked away her hide-bound blankets, tucked her knees into her settee and glared hatefully at them. No, she was not weak, never weak. A lone tear ran down her cheek. A gift can be a blight, and a kind word can be a slight. A burning